Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Deku faced the League of Villains again, part 1. If you guys enjoy this what if and want to see part 2, comment down below and let me know before I start. Please do support for more awesome content. And leave a like and don't forget to subscribe to my channel and also share this video with your friends and check out the description in my playlist. So let's start the video. What does it mean to be the greatest hero? The night sky was painfully dark, and the air unnervingly motionless, a stark contrast to the policemen bustling around a cordon patch of soil. Men in hazmat suits were bent over, meticulously sweeping every inch of the soil with high-tech-looking devices. Among them stood a tall blonde man dressed in a colorful costume, offering comfort to a small group of victims. It was really just the children who needed the comforting presence of Japan's #1 hero, though. Everyone else was mostly unscathed from the train accident. The blonde man turned his head towards the sound of tires screeching, observing a thin, bespectacled man stepping out of his car. "Night-Eye, nice to have you here," he said cheerily, keeping the Cheshire Cat grin on his face. After all, it was his signature toothy smile that soothed the thousands of people he had saved over so many years. "All might." Night-Eye nodded at him. The plain-clothed man walked towards the chief detective, who was staring intently at something in his hand. "You know, I'm not really the type of hero to inspire and comfort the masses." He shook his head. "So why call me all the way out here in the middle of the night?" "Come now, Sir Night-Eye." All Might's voice boomed over the whirring equipment. "I'm sure this has something to do with villains, or 𝗧𝗏𝗄𝐺 wouldn't have wasted your time calling your hero agency." Chief Detective 𝗧𝗏𝗄𝐺 held out a small Ziploc bag. It contained some soil, presumably originating from the cordoned-off area, but something seemed to be off. Sir Night-Eye squinted at the swirling purple mass in the bag. "What kind of gas is that?" All Might echoed his thoughts out loud. "We don't know." 𝗧𝗏𝗄𝐺 shook his head. "Preliminary investigations have revealed no match with any element on this earth, and the energy state of the surrounding soil is also highly unusual. It seems that I think it's better that you see for yourselves." The man pinched some soil from the ground and dropped it into the bag. Nothing unusual happened at first, and then a striking glimmer shone from inside the transparent bag. "As you can see, the gas transmuted the soil into some sort of metal," the detective said. "And that's not all it does. We have collected a multitude of various elements in the vicinity. We believe that this unknown gas can transmute elements randomly." "Is this the doing of a villain's quirk?" Sir Night-Eye asked, glancing at the overturned train in the distance. "But why use it to derail a train of all things?" "We don't think a villain derailed the train. Not on purpose, at least," 𝗧𝗏𝗄𝐺 replied grimly. Although all the civilians were unharmed, many eyewitnesses saw a bright light in the distance before the train accident. What's intriguing is that their train was abruptly stopped by some kind of invisible force before it hit the ground. A small humanoid figure was seen scurrying away in the dark after that. "Any clues as to who or what that is?" All Might asked. 𝗧𝗏𝗄𝐺 fished out a phone in response. An eyewitness attempted to take a video of the escaping figure. He could not get a clear shot, but he did manage to get the detective paused the video, pointing at a man staring in the distance. "This guy looks familiar." "Jiren, a broker with strong ties to the League of Villains," Sir Night-Eye affirmed, turning to the costumed hero. "That's what they called themselves, right?" All Might nodded, his face a picture of grave concern. A group of villains calling themselves the League of Villains had invaded the USJ training facility a day ago, and now another one of their affiliates had conveniently showed up at an accident site. He sighed wistfully, turning back at the accident victims being escorted back to the nearby Misutafu prefecture. The world was getting more dangerous by the day, and there were still so many people he wanted to save. But if he faltered for even a second, the symbol of peace he represented would be shattered beyond repair. "Bad incidents have been happening one after another. What a pain," Sir Night-Eye lamented as the scientists packed up their equipment. "Whatever the case, we have to be on guard for another attack," 𝗧𝗏𝗄𝐺 commented. "The police will devote our resources into investigating this League of Villains as well. I have a feeling that this is going to turn out to be much more than a mere accident." The top hero turned back with a bright smile on his face. "Everything will be fine, gentlemen. After all, I am still here to save the day. It seems your protégé has pretty big shoes to fill." Night-Eye smirked, slightly amused at the hero's unbridled optimism. "Let's hope he can live up to the greatest hero in Japan. Everyone, morning homeroom is about to start. Stop talking and take your seats." Izuku Midoriya flicked his head to the source of the voice as his class rep, Tenya, rushed into the classroom with his hands spread out like airplane wings. There was an awkward moment of silence as everyone stared at him. "We're already in our seats." "You're the only one who's not," his classmate, Hantashiro, spoke up cheekily. Tenya walked back to his seat, muttering grudgingly to himself. Izuku looked at his scarred hands again. It had been about a month since the USJ training facility attack, and the police still had no news about apprehending the League of Villains. He shuddered internally, recalling how close All Might had gotten to exposing his weakness to the world. One for All was an incredibly powerful quirk that All Might had passed on to him, but he could not yet wield it without hurting himself in the process. Although he had been training ever since he recovered from his broken arm, he still felt like he was yards away from even matching his mentor's power. He had to get stronger, and he had to do it fast. The sound of his classroom door sliding open jolted the boy out of his thoughts. "Mr. Aizawa, you're back already," a girly voice exclaimed. "You're too much of a pro." Izuku glanced at her. Concern flushed all over her face, and her cheeks looked as pink as ever. Ochako Uraraka was her name, and she was the first person he spoke to in Ua High. He never properly asked her what happened during the USJ incident, but he was just glad that she was alive and well when it was all over. He shifted his attention back to his homeroom teacher, who was almost completely covered in bandages from his severe injuries. The teacher had protected Class 1A by holding off a huge group of villains all by himself, though at the expense of having his face smashed into the ground by a huge monster called a 𝗵𝗲. Strict as he may be, Mr. Shota Aizawa was a hero through and through. "Glad to see you're doing okay," Tenya called out, in stark contrast to the teacher's physical state. The class attention did not linger too long on their teacher, quickly shifting to the foreign-looking boy that came in tow with him. "My welfare isn't important," Aizawa said flatly, gesturing to the shy-looking boy beside him. "Sorry I'm late. I had a last-minute request to pick him up." "Go on, introduce yourself to the class." "Hey everyone," the boy said in a surprisingly confident voice. "My name is Felix 𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗵𝗲, and I'm an exchange student from Greece. I entered Ua High via recommendations. Let's be friends." Murmuring broke out in the class immediately as Aizawa motioned the boy to an empty seat beside Izuku, who flashed an enthusiastic smile at the exchange student. Felix had brown hair, and looked slightly older than the average 16-year-old, which seemed to strike the fancy of some of his female classmates. "Don't get too excited, class." Aizawa's gravelly voice cut through the commotion. "Your fight is far from over." The commotion got worse. "Our fight?" Katsuki Bakugo's easily recognizable rasp perked up. "Don't tell me." Memories of the villain attack flashed through Izuku's mind again. "More villains?" Minoru Mineta echoed Izuku's thoughts from behind, his voice trembling in fear. A sports festival is drawing near," the teacher announced, silencing the class once more. "That's a normal school event." The class erupted in eager anticipation. Izuku stole a glance at Felix's confused look before leaning towards him. "Our sports festival is one of Japan's biggest events. The Olympics were once the world's sports festival, and the whole country would be whipped into a frenzy about them," Izuku explained excitedly. "But now, the tradition has shrunk into a shell of its former glory. As far as Japan is concerned, what's taken the place of the Olympics is the Ua Sports Festival. It's akin to Greece's famous Olympics." Momoyae Oruzu leaned forward from behind Felix, hoping to bring some familiarity to the exchange student. "I'm sure you know all about that, of course. Mr. Aizawa, are you sure it's okay to hold the sports festival so quickly after the USJ villain attack?" Denki Kaminari asked, and a few of his classmates nodded their heads in agreement. "The administration believes that this is a good way to show that the threat has been handled, and our school is safer than ever," Aizawa replied. "Plus, they're beefing up security compared to past years. Above all, our sports festival is a huge chance. It's not an event to be cancelled just because of a few villains." The class fell silent in response, although some were still looking slightly concerned. "Oh, and one more thing." Aizawa pointed at Felix. "Since you're an official Ua student for the year, you'll be required to participate in the festival as well. Do your best. The nation's top heroes will be watching. Same goes for the rest of you. You have 3 chances, once a year, if you're hoping to be a hero. This is an event you can't miss," the teacher said. "You'll gain popularity if you're picked up by a big-name hero, but your time is limited. Show the pros what you're made of, and you'll make futures for yourselves." And with that, Mr. Aizawa dismissed the class. "Hey, you're 𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗵𝗲, right?" Ochako hopped over to the new student's seat. "My name is Ochako Uraraka. Nice to meet you." Felix stared blankly at her. "Nice to meet you as well, 𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗵𝗲," Izuku spouted enthusiastically as Felix's head whipped back to him. "I look forward to seeing you in action. Speaking of which, what's your quirk? What kind of festivals are prominent in Greece? Do you know the legendary Greek hero, Pancration?" Felix mumbled unintelligibly, clearly overwhelmed by the boy's enthusiasm. "Awa, he's shy." Ochako giggled. "Come hang out with us for lunch. We'll tell you all about Japan and Ua High." She walked off to talk about the sports festival with her classmates, leaving Izuku to hound Felix with more questions. Seeking familiar ground chapter text. Izuku Midoriya wasted no time bombarding Felix with information about his classmates' names and quirks, despite the poor boy looking more and more confused by the minute. It didn't help that the rest of the class were already busy discussing the sports festival among themselves, so there was no one else Felix could escape to. "So, what's your quirk?" Izuku repeated himself at the blank-eyed student. "Quirk. What's a?" Felix froze for a moment, as though he was unfamiliar with the term. Oh, you mean my ability. I have E.S.P, I'm psychic. Huh. Bakugo butted in with a condescending smirk already plastered on his face. You're gonna bend some spoons or something. See my future with a crystal ball. TCH. Do you really expect me to believe that the supernatural exists? Kaken, you're being disrespectful, Izuku exclaimed, but Felix chuckled slightly and waved his hand. Sorry, I think you misunderstood my words, the foreign boy said. I meant to say that I have psychokinesis. Pink flickered in Felix's eyes, and all the furniture in the classroom floated upwards, carried by that same pink glow. Izuku's jaw dropped, noticing that even the classroom fans had been forced to stop spinning by an invisible force. Bakugo's body tensed up as the whole class stopped talking immediately. Even the number 2 hero's son, Shoto Todoroki, was staring apprehensively at Felix. Wow, that's an amazing quirk. Izuku clapped his hands excitedly as Felix relinquished his telekinetic hold on the objects. You don't even look the least bit strained. That was nothing much. Felix gave him a wry smile, before turning to Ochako and Tenya bounding in their direction. Did you do that? That was amazing, she piped. Are there any drawbacks for you to do that? I get all nauseous when I apply my zero gravity on anything more than 3 tons. Please respect school property in the future, Tenya warned the boy with a stern look, before pushing up his glasses and breaking into a small smile. But that was indeed awe-inspiring, Paganus. I'm glad we have such a strong student in our class. Izuku took out his notebook and hurriedly noted down Felix's ability, but was quickly interrupted by a war cry of some sort. He looked up at Ochako, who had her fist raised and body bent low as though preparing for a fight. I'm going to do my best, she growled with a darkened expression. Her classmates cheered her on enthusiastically. I said I'm going to do my best. She turned around and repeated herself. Her classmates cheered her on awkwardly this time. Izuku smiled at her energetic display, closing his notebook as the lunch bell rang. He got out of his seat quickly and called out to her. Hey Uraraka, I have a question to ask. I wonder what he wanted with Deku. I heard that when All Might was attacked by villains during the USJ incident, Midoriya tried to stop him himself. Tenya answered Ochako. Perhaps that's what this is all about. Felix queued for his lunch silently, observing the crowded school cafeteria while his classmates continued their conversation behind him. Izuku had been whisked away by a huge blonde teacher named All Might to have lunch for some reason, leaving his classmates to eat without him. All Might's power is pretty similar to Midoriya's, a pinched voice spoke. Maybe he wanted to mentor him personally. How lucky, Tenya nodded. Suiwasui, right. Is it possible for 2 people to have the same power? Felix asked, turning around abruptly at the pinched-sounding girl, who looked like she had been fused with a frog. Call me Tsu. Ribbit. There are many quirks with similarities, but there has been no instances of any 2 people with the same exact quirk, she replied. That's why it's called a quirk, isn't it? Yeah, that's fairly common knowledge, Ochako said cheerily. Unless things are different back in Greece for you. And no, of course not. Felix stuttered as he collected his food, using it as an excuse to avoid the topic. His classmates collected their food soon enough as well, and sat beside him. So Paganus, did you come to Japan by yourself? Tenya asked the boy. Or is your family here with you? Felix shifted uncomfortably as his face fell. My parents died in a traffic accident. And my sister. He was struggling to form words. She was murdered by. I'm sorry. Anyway, I'm here by myself. I deeply apologize for causing you discomfort, Tenya said solemnly as an awkward atmosphere fell over the group of classmates. Don't worry about it. Felix forced a smile again. It's not like you did it on purpose. By the way, what happened at the USJ? I've been hearing people talk about it. Right, you don't know about it, Ochako said as the table collectively relaxed their bodies, grateful for the change in topic. To summarize, a group of villains calling themselves the League of Villains attacked us during one of our training classes in the Unseen Simulation Joint. We're all fine though, thanks to the teachers who protected us. Well, I suppose it's fortunate that your teachers arrived right on time to chase away the villains. Felix chuckled. Sounds like you heroes are in for a lot of trouble in the future. You must have pretty noble intentions to be risking your lives like that. Funny, Deku said the same thing earlier. Ochako bowed her head slightly in embarrassment. My family owns a construction business, so I wanted to be a hero to make enough money and help them with their business. It's nothing noble. Why not help them directly with your ability? You can make objects weightless, right? Felix tilted his head. Must being a hero be the only career path to success? Who's to say that the public will even appreciate your efforts? Being a hero is a prestigious job. Tenya chopped the air, as if to emphasize his point. I come from a family of heroes, so I'm obviously next in line to be just like them. My brother is the hero, Ingenium, and I aspire to save people just like him. Ribbit, how about you, Felix? Sue asked. Why did you agree to come to UA High for an exchange program? Felix continued eating his food as though he had not heard her the first time. Sue opened her mouth to repeat herself, but he looked up again. Oh, you were talking to me. The boy replied vaguely, I guess I just wanted to see for myself what your hero school is like. 𝐒𝐴CHAKO giggled. You almost sound like you're some kind of spy. Well, I hope 𝐒𝐴HI doesn't disappoint you. Felix smiled wryly at her as the group of friends got up to make their way back to their classroom. They had barely turned into the corridor when a loud commotion caught their attention. Tenya straightened up as he shifted into full class representative mode and rushed towards the huge group of students blocking Class 1A's doorway. Do you have some sort of business with our class? Tenya asked in a calm but authoritative voice. Stop blocking the doorway. Kaminari's voice could be heard from within the classroom. I won't let you take us hostage. Mina's familiar purple ball head popped up over Kaminari's striking blonde hair. They're scouting out the enemy. We're the ones who made it out of the villain's attack. They probably want to check us out for the sports festival. Bakugo's voice sounded calmer this time, although it was still undeniably raspy. There's no point in doing stuff like that. At least they know what a real future pro hero looks like now. Out of my way, extras. This Bakugo guy is pretty arrogant, isn't he? Felix nudged 𝗧𝗏, who was looking absolutely petrified at Bakugo's rude demeanor. Dude, stop calling people extras just because you don't know them. The red-haired boy swung his arm around Bakugo. Felix tilted his head as he tried to recall his name. Was it Hiroshima? No, I think it was Kirishima now. Is everyone in the hero course delusional? Or is it just you? A purple-haired boy scoffed as the rest of Class 1A shook their heads vigorously. I came to see what the famous Class 1A was like, but you seem pretty arrogant. Are all the students in the hero course like this? That's just disappointing. Bakugo stopped in his tracks, staring at him aggressively. There are quite a few people who enrolled in general studies or other courses because they didn't make it into the hero course, the boy continued. But fortunately, the school has given us a chance. Did you know that? Depending on the results of the sports festival, they'll consider our transfer into the hero course, and it seems they may also transfer people out. He smirked audibly, scouting out the enemy. I came to say one thing. Even if you're in the hero course, don't get too carried away, or I'll sweep your feet out from under you. Consider this a declaration of war. The unknown student walked off silently, as though he was a politician who had just finished a rallying speech. Commotion increased as more students, including those from Class 1B, began yelling at Bakugo as well. Felix turned back to wait the situation out until the next bell rang, and spotted Izuku walking out of the staff room with a huge blonde-haired teacher. His expression darkened, observing their interaction carefully. So this is who you chose, Toshinori Yagi. Hot and cold chapter text. The next 2 weeks flew by as everyone began their earnest training for the sports festival, especially with the hope that those who do well enough will stand a much better chance at becoming pro heroes. Some chose to train by themselves, like Bakugo and Todoroki. Others, like 𝗧𝗏 and 𝗬𝗏, chose to train together to strengthen both their teamwork and their quirks. Felix had also been mingling more with his classmates over the course of the training period, although Izuku still can't help but feel that this new student seems to be carrying a heavy baggage. It was not long until the day before the sports festival arrived, and a group of US students walked into a junkyard for their final joint training. You sure you don't want to join us? 𝗧𝗏 asked with a slight pout. Izuku's dark green hair fluffed in the wind as he shook his head. He climbed onto a stack of scrap metal and took out his hand strengtheners again. I still can't really control my quirk yet. I don't want to make a mess, the boy replied from his vantage point. Besides, you guys are going to need an umpire, so I volunteer. The 4 students took up their positions in the large empty space surrounded by walls of abandoned vehicles. Now, the objective of this sparring session is to strengthen your quirks, so don't hold back when it comes to securing a win, Izuku announced, doing his best Aizawa impression. 𝗬 and Felix, you're a team. Ada, you're Raka, work together. Ready, go. 𝗬 wasted no time, stretching out her tongue towards Tenya. The boy darted around, his speed bolstered by the engines in his calves, and dodged all her attacks. Both of them clashed in a blistering dance of mobility as 𝗬 leapt around, using her environment to her advantage. An easy win, Tenya roared victoriously, aiming a kick at 𝗬 from behind and crashed into a pink barrier. The class rep got to his feet quickly, watching carefully as the surrounding rubble rearranged themselves like leaping platforms. 𝗬 took the cue to leap onto them. Tenya tried to chase after her, but more pieces of rubble simply knocked him away. Not so fast, Paganus. 𝗧𝗏 whizzed around in a frenzy, nullifying the gravity of everything around her. She kicked them towards the floating rubble, disrupting Felix's precise arrangement of the environment. Felix, look out. 𝗬 called out in warning, but it was too late. You should have kept your eyes on me. The girl yelled as her fingers made contact with Felix's body. Now float. Nothing happened. Why didn't my quirk work? 𝗧𝗏 gasped in genuine surprise, staring at the boy with a slight pink aura around his body. Oh, don't get it wrong. It did work. Felix laughed, waving his hand casually. I'm just anchoring myself back to the ground with psychokinesis. His eyes flashed suddenly, and he stretched a hand out. Tenya's well-timed kick missed its target yet again as 𝗬𝗏 was telekinetically dragged back to Felix's side. A force field formed around the two of them as Tenya rushed towards them. A shield too. That is very impressive, Tenya said as he pummeled the pink bubble relentlessly together with 𝐒𝐴chako. But we'll break it. Izuku leaned forward from his makeshift umpire chair, muttering to himself. Felix's spatial awareness is incredible, and his mastery of his quirk is nearly, if not already, perfected. But, come on, Felix, he yelled out. You can't win with just defensive moves. Don't hold back anymore. Energy blasted from the shield without warning, knocking 𝗂𝐴chako and Tenya away. Izuku leapt down from his seat before the resulting gust of wind toppled the heap of metal he was sitting on. 𝗂𝐴chako was not so lucky. Izuku only had time to stretch his hand out in warning as a scrapped lorry fell off its unstable platform, threatening to crush the girl. She raised a trembling hand to receive the falling vehicle. The lorry froze in midair before it could touch her fingertips, caught by a pink glow. Felix waved his hand and set the abandoned vehicle gently on the floor. The students rushed towards 𝗂𝐴chako, who slumped back to the floor, overcome by adrenaline. 𝗂𝗂chako, are you all right? Felix exclaimed, kneeling beside her. Oh gods, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to push that hard. I'm all right. Thanks for saving me. 𝗂𝗂chako gave him a small smile as Izuku helped her to her feet. I think that's enough for today, Izuku said, after making sure that everyone else was unscathed as well. Indeed, Tenya nodded, before turning to Felix. You have such incredible mastery of your quirk. Not many heroes can lift a lorry so casually. You simply must teach me your training regimen. Laughter ensued as the group of students left the junkyard. Izuku trailed behind them, still deep in thought. There was no doubt about Felix's unbridled telekinetic strength, but there was still something disturbing about him. Izuku looked at Felix once again as he recalled the fight. Although the others probably did not notice it during the heat of the battle, he had the advantage of overseeing the match, and in the split second before Felix unleashed his psionic power, there was something eerily familiar about his expression. The cold look in his eyes that resembled that of the villains during the USJ attack. Izuku was minding his own business in the changing room when Shoto Todoroki approached him with all intentions of hostility. Midoriya. Todoroki began in a voice as intense as ever. Todoroki, what is it? Izuku tried his best not to squeak like he had just been caught red-handed for something he wasn't even aware he had done. Looking at things objectively, I think it's fair to say I'm stronger than you. Who even starts a conversation like that? I've only just changed into my gym attire. Huh? Izuku stared at him wide-eyed, before trailing his voice away. Yeah, but All Might has his eye on you, doesn't he? Todoroki's voice dropped, but continued before Izuku could reply. I'm not trying to pry about that. Then why even bring it up? But know this, I'm going to beat you. Why are you telling me this again? Hey now, no need to pick a fight right before the sports festival, Felix said cheerily, putting a hand on Todoroki's shoulder. The half-white, half-red-haired boy shook his hand off as though it was a burning hot iron. And you, exchange student. Todoroki trained his hostile gaze at him. I'm going to beat you too. Izuku tensed up as he noticed the same coldness flash in Felix's eyes again, although contempt also accompanied his gaze this time. Come on, lighten up. Felix raised his hands in mock surrender. This is a live performance. Let's all just put on a show, have some fun, and make friends. Why the cold shoulder? Don't forget, this isn't a team effort. Todoroki turned away. We're not here to play at making friends. Todoroki, Izuku called out to the boy. I don't know what you're thinking when you say you'll beat me, but of course you're better than me. I think you're more capable than most people, from an objective standpoint. He turned to the class. But, everyone, the students from the other courses are aiming for the top with everything they've got. His voice trembled with emotion. We want to become the heroes, don't we? We can't afford to fall behind. The room nodded in emphatic agreement as Izuku faced Todoroki again. His voice dropped to a determined whisper. So go ahead and bring your best. I'll be going for it with everything I have too. Todoroki walked away without a further word. Nothing stands in my way chapter text. This school sure is full of surprises, Felix thought to himself after a provocatively dressed hero named Midnight invited the hot-headed Bakugo to give an even more provoking speech for the sports festival's opening ceremony. Jeers from both the crowd and the competitors grated his ears as Bakugo stepped down from the podium, ignoring the thousands of enemies he had just made by saying that he would beat them all. The boy was confident in his abilities, that's for sure, but he was terrible at inspiring people. Felix yawned, watching Midnight explain the 4-kilometer obstacle course that was to be their first challenge. The summer sun was sweltering, and the gym attire wasn't exactly cooling enough to fend off the heat lulling him to sleep. The crowd of competitors started jostling around him without warning. It took a while before Felix realized that the first event had already started. He levitated himself into the air, just in time to see a huge burst of ice break through the entrance door to the obstacle course. He blinked in confusion. Right, Izuku did mention that this Todoroki guy can use ice moves on one side of his body and fire moves on the other. Yells flooded the air as the competitors struggled to dislodge themselves from the ice, which had frozen their feet to the ground. Felix soared after the figure, rapidly ice skating away, letting the cooling breeze freshen himself up. Naive, Todoroki, I won't let you get away so easily. You half-and-half bastard. You got me with that once. You won't get me again. Felix looked with awe at the Class 1A students also in hot pursuit of the ice user. It was obvious that they already had some real combat experience, despite being mere 16-year-old students in their first year of high school. A flash of movement caught his eye. The psychic leaned back, narrowly avoiding the hunk of metal which crashed into the ground in an attempt to hit him. His eyes narrowed at the array of giant robots barring their way. Even Todoroki had stopped running, his body getting into a combat stance. Targets found. A robotic voice emanated from within the painted steel. That's not good. Ice burst out from Todoroki's right arm in response, freezing the building-tall robot in a single wide sweep. He disappeared from view quickly, skating away between its legs. Felix folded his arms with an impressed look on his face. But he's pretty good. Look, between their legs. An unfamiliar voice shouted. We can get through. Felix's eyes narrowed with realization before Pink coated his hand. Sure enough, there was a loud creaking as the off-balance robot toppled over. The competitors yelled in shock as the huge shadow loomed over them. What are you lot waiting for? Felix called out to his classmates, his eyes glowing as he held the robots in midair. I'm not going to hold them up forever. Hurry up and get through. The competitors froze for a moment, stunned by the boy's charity, and then they broke into a mad dash. Seriously? What's wrong with you, idiot? Bakugo's voice was barely audible as he blasted his way up and over the hovering psychic. Felix dropped the robot after deciding that he had wasted enough precious time and continued flying ahead. The umpire, Present Mike, boomed all over the stadium, apparently impressed that this new exchange student could fly as well. More robots scuttled towards Felix, but he simply crushed them with a single squeeze of his hand and flung them aside. The boy whizzed past his fellow competitors, clearing the first obstacle with ease. The second obstacle greeted him soon enough. It was a huge chasm this time, and peppered with pillars of support spaced out by hundreds of death drops. Felix wondered how much effort it had taken for the school to build such an intricate obstacle for a mere one-time event. Izuku arrived surprisingly quickly, despite still lugging around a piece of the robot for some reason. More footsteps scurried towards them as the competitors stopped at the edge of the cliff, taking some time to admire the view together. Ribbit ribbit, this is just a glorified tightrope. Sue hopped off the chasm and landed in the middle of the rope linking the pillars together. Piece of cake. Felix turned to Izuku and Ochako. Hey, do you want some help to clear this obstacle? He offered a glowing hand. I can carry all of you with me over this ravine. Sorry, but no thanks. Izuku shook his head seriously. I want to do this with my own strength. I need to show the world that I will be a true hero. I agree, Deku. Ochako nodded as well. Don't worry about us, Felix. We've got this. Go ahead, we'll catch up. Felix watched as Izuku secured the metal plate around his waist and began painstakingly crawling along the rope. His shoulders slumped in disappointment. Why wasn't Izuku using his power even at this juncture? He shook his head and burst into the air, clearing the chasm in a single bound. The final obstacle loomed ahead, greeting the competitors with a huge signboard that read Danger. Landmines. Felix looked around at the deserted area. There was no one else around yet, which meant that he was already in second place. He spotted a small figure not too far ahead of him. Todoroki was stepping carefully on the ground, avoiding the little bumps which obviously had small landmines buried under them. And judging from the way he was avoiding using his quirk, the boy obviously did not want to create an easy ice path for the others to simply use for themselves. A loud explosion nearly deafened Felix as Bakugo blasted ahead of him, trying to make this entertaining. This doesn't affect me. The explosive-tempered boy propelled himself over the landmines, using the constant explosions from his hands to keep him in the air. Felix pursed his lips. Hot-headed as this boy was, he was surprisingly sharp. Those who could fly like Bakugo or Felix simply had a huge advantage in this obstacle race. The psychic wondered how the rest was faring in this race, but this was no time to ponder. He could already sense the crowd heading in his direction, and the two competitive boys would be crossing the finishing line soon. Felix burst forward as well. Bastard, don't declare war on the wrong person. Bakugo's aggressive roar was beginning to rival that of Present Mike's. He was throwing a cluster of explosions at Todoroki while trying to match his speed. How about a taste of your own medicine, explosion boy? Argo, what the hell? Bakugo yelled in shock as a landmine pulled itself up from the ground and detonated in his face. He crashed onto the ground, his body flailing around as he activated more mines in the progress. "Don't think I've forgotten about you, Todoroki." Felix grinned, tossing a few levitated mines at the boy as well. The ice user yelped, tumbling on the floor as well. Felix laughed like a child, clapping his hands in glee as he floated serenely ahead of them. "Screw you, asshole, you'll pay for that." Bakugo was already flying in his direction at an incredible speed, his rage-filled expression twisting his face in ways Felix never thought humanly possible. The boy's palm met his face, and Felix closed his eyes in anticipation of the blinding explosion. "What the hell?" Bakugo muttered in surprise, his voice actually dropping in volume as he stared at the grinning Felix. The explosion had barely tickled him. "Nice try, but that blast won't even scratch my psychic aura," Felix said, the pink glow surrounding his body seeming to fade in and out as the sun's rays hit it at different angles. "You're gonna have to hit harder than that, explosion boy." A deafening blast exploded from behind, as though on cue with the very word. It sounded as though someone just set off 20 mines at the same time. Felix left his jaw open at the sight above him. 𝗧𝗵𝗲 was soaring in the air ahead of everyone else, carried by the shockwave of the explosion. Felix's eyes shifted to the robot piece he was still hanging onto as his eyes widened with realization. Izuku must have dug up all the landmines and borrowed their combined explosive power to propel himself forward. "That boy's pretty darn smart," Felix thought to himself. "Deku, what do you think you're doing?" Bakugo yelled, propelling himself forward after Izuku. A cooling breeze hit Felix's face as Todoroki frantically created an ice path as well, no longer bothering about whether he would be helping the others behind. A second explosion propelled Izuku even further forward as he slammed the metal on the floor again, activating another few landmines to blast Todoroki and Bakugo away. He finally hit the ground running, and Felix flew past the two boys as well. A sports festival, first-year stage. Who could have predicted the developments of this race? President Mike announced in excitement. Right now, the first person back in the stadium is 𝗧𝗵𝗲. Sunlight hit Felix's face as he zoomed back into the stadium right after his friend. He took his time to bask in the cheers of the audience before walking to Izuku, congratulating him for a job well done. The other competitors were already starting to pour in as he took the time to rest on the side of the stadium. But he kept a watchful gaze on his friend. "Why are you hiding your true power, Midoriya? Who wants to team up?" Chapter text. The second event was something Felix was wildly unfamiliar with. A cavalry battle, whatever that meant. But he had caught the important details of the game, at least. Essentially, the first 42 competitors will team up in groups of 2 to 4. Headband points will be assigned to each of them, ranging from 10 million for first place to 5 points for 42nd place. The teams will then fight for each other's headbands to gain or lose these points, which meant that those at the top, like Izuku, Felix, Todoroki, and Bakugo, were prime targets for headband snatching. "Team up with me, exchange student." "No, you'll want me. Please, I'm begging you." It was a miracle that Felix could still breathe as the multitude of students piling on top of him only increased further by the second. "Please, everyone. I don't even know what your powers are." The boy was trying his best to placate the competitors staring hungrily at him. He was starting to regret showing off too much of his power by dispatching the robots so easily. More students descended upon him, until he managed to spot an opening. "Hey Izuku, a little help here." Felix gasped for air. "Can I be on your team?" The crowd went silent in disappointment as the most powerful competitor walked towards the most valuable participant. "Me, are you sure?" Izuku looked ready to cry. "I have 10 million points. Everyone is going to be after me." "No, you're going to join me," a dry voice spoke. "After all, you promised to be on my team, remember?" Felix turned around, coming face to face with a grinning student. His eyes narrowed in recognition. There was no way he would forget that purple-haired kid who declared war on his class. "Since when did I?" Felix froze, his eyes glazed over. "Felix, are you okay?" Izuku's voice was distant, fighting for attention against the heavy fog that clouded his mind. "What the hell? A telepathic attack of some sorts. I can't control my body." He could feel his body walking towards the kid. Felix struggled against the oppressive intruder in his mind, pushing back against the walls closing in on him. The foreign presence was fiddling with the controls in his brain. Panic flooded him. "Crap, my memories. I can't let him see my memories." Felix's psychic power focused into a single point, breaking through the telepathic walls around him. "Get out of my head, vermin," he growled in frustration, throwing a punch at the intruder in his mind. A powerful gust of wind burst from the boy, pushing all the students back. Felix charged at the general studies student, who had fallen over his feet and was still too stunned to react. His eyes glowed fiercely. "Don't ever get in my head again. You hear me?" he growled, seizing the boy's wrist roughly. "You're not the only one who can play mind games, Hitoshi Shinso." He let go of Shinso, who was looking visibly shaken by the violent reaction. Felix turned his attention back to Izuku, leaving everyone else to wonder what the hell just happened. What was that? Izuku queried. Beware the serpent's tongue, Felix warned. A single question from him is enough to poison your mind. Izuku stared at him blankly. Anyway, Felix said, resuming a cheery tone. Can I be on your team? It's better to team up with people you're already familiar with, right? Oh, well, we have Tokoyami and Uraraka here, so you can be our last member. Izuku's face was creased with concern. Although, we would be having the 2 highest points on the same team. That's just going to make us an even bigger target. We're going to need a solid strategy if we want to win this. Let's keep it simple, eh? Felix smiled. Do you want to go on the offensive or defensive? Can you elaborate? The boy with a crow's head on his shoulders asked in a low voice. I'm assuming you're Tokoyami, right? Nice to meet you, Felix replied. To answer your question, the defensive strategy would be for me to shield our entire group for the entire duration of the game. I could also telekinetically snatch everyone's headbands when the game starts, winning the match immediately. That would be the offensive strategy. I think you're either overestimating us or underestimating everyone else here. Izuku gave a crooked smile, scratching the back of his head. I'm doubtful we can hold out just by staying still for the entire game. Indeed, we would be made even more of a public enemy if we took everyone's headbands right from the beginning. Takayami added as a monster-like shadow popped out from his torso. Dark Shadow here can only fend off so many attacks. Fighting in the daytime diminishes his combat ability too, since light is his weakness. Don't worry, people. I have a plan, Izuku said confidently. There's no doubt that everyone will be gunning for us once the game starts. We can't fight them all, but all we have to do is run away. With Uraraka's zero gravity, Felix's telekinesis, and Dark Shadow watching our back, I'm sure we can pull this off. Yeah, Ochako pumped her fists enthusiastically. Felix smirked. Yeah, we got this. Now, raise those battle cries. Present Mike announced from his umpire seat as the 12 cavalries assembled themselves. It's time for UAS bloody battle. Izuku fastened his headband, sitting himself comfortably on Felix's psionic seat with Ochako and Tokoyami flanking his sides. The psychic had even taken the liberty of including a seatbelt to strap him in snugly. Light the signal fire. Bakugo's and Todoroki's respective teams were already staring daggers at them, counting down to the brutal battle royale. 3, 2, 1, this is it. Start. The competitors wasted no time as the closest 4 teams descended on Izuku's team like a pack of ravenous wolves. Make your choice, Midoriya. Tokoyami called out. Fight or run. That's easy, Izuku muttered to himself, before raising his voice again. We run. Izuku felt his stomach lurch immediately as Felix burst 10 meters into the air in less than a second. Amazement sparkled in his eyes. But there was no time to waste admiring his friend's power now. Land there. Izuku pointed at the patch of land furthest away from everyone else. Felix obeyed without hesitation and touched down in an equally short amount of time. But that proved a fatal mistake. Whoa, what's happening? Ochako piped. Crap, our feet are stuck. Felix exclaimed as the team began sinking into the ground as though it was suddenly made of soft mud. It must be that guy's quirk. Izuku pointed at a student whose mouth resembled that of an exposed skull. The ground was rippling like waves from where he stood. This is bad, Tokoyami said darkly as the ground hardened again around their knee level. We are literally stuck in the worst possible situation. Purple balls flew in their direction, accompanied by an elongated tongue as Mina's team dashed towards them, intent on stealing credit for the Mudman's efforts. Shinso's team was also charging towards them from the other side, carried by a dazed-looking Ajiro from Class 1A. Izuku, Felix asked his fretting leader, who was looking more desperate as more teams showed themselves. Permission to immobilize our attackers. What? Izuku squeaked in a confused voice. Granted. A deafening crackle tore through the air as a huge sonic wave burst from Felix's body. It crashed into the attacking teams, splitting most of them apart and disqualifying them immediately. There we go, Felix said with satisfaction in his voice as the crowd erupted in cheer at the psychic's impressive display of power. All too easy. The other competitors stopped in their tracks and turned to each other, suddenly remembering that they could fight amongst themselves for the headbands as well. Izuku heaved a sigh of relief for the much-needed respite as Felix dislodged everyone's feet from the ground. You make a formidable ally, Paganus, Tokoyami said, to dispatch so many people in a single move. I'm surprised you aren't already a pro hero. Izuku's gaze fell on Class 1A's Mashirao Ajiro, who was rubbing his head tenderly. The dazed look in his eyes was gone for some reason, and he was looking around with a confused expression. His eyes narrowed, looking at the back of Shinso walking off. Whatever that general studies student's quirk was, it clearly had something to do with mind control. Guys. Ochako's nervous voice sputtered. Mina got me, Izuku gasped, noticing the purple ball sticking Ochako's boot to the ground. And to make matters worse, Her boot was not a simple shoe that she could easily slip off. What? But I thought 𝗵𝗃𝗲's team was over here, Midoriya. Izuku flinched as a human tank made of 6 arms covered with webs of skin charged straight at them. 𝗵𝗃𝗲 and 𝗬𝗏 were barely visible, almost completely protected by Mizo Shoji's dupli arm quirk. Is that even allowed? Streaks of ice cornered the defending team as well, and a bolt of electricity bursted towards them. Dark shadow popped up, shrinking away in apparent pain as it took the brunt of the attack. Todoroki had also joined in the fight, carried by Tenya as well as Kaminari and Momo on his flanks. The ice user casually sent another line of ice towards 𝗬's team to freeze them in place while Momo passed a long pole to her rider. Tenya increased his speed, carrying the determined-looking Todoroki closer to his target. Felix swiped his hand as a thick psionic wall began to materialize between them. But Todoroki's team suddenly vanished with nothing but a flash and the sound of a roaring engine. Izuku looked around frantically. What? Where'd they go? Recipro burst. Izuku's head jerked back roughly as Todoroki appeared from behind the boundaries of the psychic barrier, swiping the most valuable headband from him. Impossible, Felix grunted in surprise as Tenya grinned at them. Such speed. No, give it back. Izuku's quirk ignited in his arm as he stretched out to snatch the headband back. Todoroki's eyes widened in shock as flames started to spread on the left side of his body. Izuku fanned the flames out with a powerful sweep. He cringed in pain. His hand hurt, but it was thankfully still not broken. The boy seized the opportunity to twist his body with the momentum, reaching out his other hand towards the off-balanced Todoroki. He flipped the headbands inside out to hide their point values, but he put the 10 million point headband on last, which means, I got it. Izuku snatched the top headband right back from Todoroki as the crowd roared in excitement again. Todoroki spun around in anger, stretching his hand for Izuku. Not so fast. Felix's eyes glowed again as he made contact with Todoroki's face. He faltered for a moment as though his power had activated suddenly, and Momo took the chance to slap his hand away. An aggressive yell burst from above them. Who has the band? Bakugo had appeared out of nowhere and was 3 meters in the air, hurtling towards them. Icy hot bastard. Wait, we were wrong, Felix shouted desperately, stretching out a pink-coated hand. Izuku looked around in confusion. Another headband was ripped out from the bottom of Todoroki's neck. Bakugo was inches from them. Time's up. Bakugo fell to the ground abruptly, as though suddenly remembering to obey the law of gravity. The last headband that Felix attempted to seize hit the floor at the same time. The explosive boy growled, smacking the ground in frustration. External influence chapter text. Todoroki was still staring at his left hand like it was a traitorous foreign object while Midnight totaled up the final scores. Turns out, he had anticipated such a maneuver and tricked Izuku into snatching a mere 70-point headband. However, the 10 million point headband which Felix had pulled off was forfeited as well, since it had dropped to the ground. Fortunately, Takoyami's dark shadow had secretly managed to steal Todoroki's original headband and secure the team a place in the finals. Congratulations on making it to the finals. Tenya approached a teary-eyed Izuku, says the one who made it to first place. Ochako giggled, punching him lightly in the arm. We never knew you could pull off such an incredible move, Ida. You really were holding out on us, weren't you? It was just a strategic deception to secure our win, Tenya said in a firm voice, before turning to Felix. Besides, I'm obviously not the only one holding back his true power on purpose, taking out 5 teams in a single move. Paganus, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't nervous about facing you back there. We're in 3rd place, good enough to move on to the finals. That's all that matters. Felix shrugged and glanced at Bakugo, who was still screaming his lungs out in frustration. Boy, am I glad I'm not on that guy's team. 2nd place, and still whining about it. Did you hear? Our final event is going to be a one-on-one tournament match. Ochako piped. That means we'll get to fight each other. One-on-one? Huh. Felix's voice trailed away, deep in thought. Some students forfeited their place though. I heard it's because they were under some sort of mind control, so they didn't think they deserved the spot, Izuku added. I wonder what the matchup will be like now. That's a question that can wait until after lunch, Ochako said cheerily, rubbing her stomach. I'm starving. Let's go grab some food. Midoriya. Todoroki's solemn voice snatched Izuku's attention before he could reply to the girl. Izuku turned around at the boy marching up towards him. Meet me at the faculty entrance. I have something to talk to you about. Hey, long time no see. Let's have tea, Endeavor. The number 2 hero did little to hide his irritation at his rival's annoyingly bright voice. He tilted his body sideways slightly, glaring at the 2-meter-tall blonde man grinning at him. All might, he growled, acknowledging the man's presence grudgingly. I haven't seen you since that talk we had with the press 10 years ago. Huh. All Might walked down the staircase to meet him. I saw you, so I thought I'd say hi. I see. Well, you've already done that, so leave me, Endeavor replied in a gravelly voice, turning his back on the hero. What a joke. I'm going to the washroom. Begone. A stray breeze hit the flames covering his entire body. All Might's hearty laugh echoed around the stairway as he landed in front of Endeavor after an elaborate flip, barring his path forward. "Come on, Endeavor. Why the cold shoulder?" the #1 hero said, apparently oblivious to the man whose shoulders were quite literally on fire. "Your son, young Shoto, did wonderfully without even using half of his power. Is it because he was taught well? What are you trying to say?" "Why, I seriously want to know how to raise the next generation. Do you really think I'd tell you anything?" Endeavor scoffed, purposely bumping into All Might as he walked past him. "You're clueless as usual, and it's getting on my nerves. Out of my way." The grumpy hero had barely taken another 2 steps forward when he was stopped in his tracks by another prominent student climbing up the stairs. "Sorry, excuse me," Felix mumbled as he bowed his head before turning in another direction. "Hey, young one," Endeavor called out. "You're the new exchange student, aren't you?" Felix glanced at the 2 burly men standing in front of him. "I'm sorry, do I know you? I see you really are new to Japan." Endeavor folded his arms. "I am Endeavor, the flaming hero. You know my son, Shoto Todoroki." A dark look crossed Felix's face. "Your performance in the sports festival was stellar." Endeavor pointed at him, clearly ignorant of the boy's rapidly souring expression. "You have boundless potential, boy, and I would like to offer you an internship at my agency." My, aren't we a little aggressive here?" All Might peeked over Endeavor's shoulder. "Young Paganus hasn't even been in this school for a month. The best heroes are not bound by institutions. They constantly work hard to strive for their ambitions, no matter where they come from," Endeavor replied without looking at the blonde man. "Not like someone like you would ever understand anyway." Felix chuckled slowly, looking up at the man with a cold look in his eyes. "An internship? With a man as sinful as you?" A slight smirk hung on his lips. "You really have no sense of self-awareness, do you? No wonder Todoroki turned out like that." What the Endeavor raised his voice, taken aback by the boy's response. "Who do you think you are? How dare you speak to your elders in this manner? And who do you think you are? You're a faux hero, abusing your children, beating up your wife, all for the sake of compensating for your weakness. If you really are a hero, you should be locking yourself up." "𝗵𝗃. Did Shoto tell you all that?" Endeavor calmed back down. "That boy is in a rebellious stage now, but I will make him into a hero that surpasses everyone. Even the great All Might here will be no match for him. That is why I created him. A child like you will never understand my intentions. He will beat you, all of you. I will make sure of that." All Might stepped back in shock. "Created him?" Endeavor ignored him, continuing to stare daggers at the insolent student. "A powerful hero. Well, you are welcome to challenge us." Felix prepared to take his leave. "Hold on," All Might interjected. "What do you mean by us?" The boy froze in his tracks for a moment, before turning back with a small grin. "Sorry, I meant me. Pray forgive my mistake. I'm a little tired." He turned on his heel and left briskly, leaving Endeavor to simmer at his retreating back. Felix's footsteps were replaced by a much urgent one as Midnight scurried over to the 2 heroes. She took a moment to catch her breath. "There you are, gentlemen. All the relevant heroes are already at the meeting room. We don't have much time to waste." Shota Aizawa was about to retreat into his sleeping bag when Endeavor and All Might walked through the door. He was still wrapped in bandages like a mummy, but not like that stopped Present Mike from dragging him to be his co-MC. A hero's work is never finished, although it would be nice to take a break once in a while. The blocky-head 𝗵𝗲 lit up a projection while the rest of the heroes settled into their seats. There was no shortage of heroes in this room, that was for sure. Although the U.S. Sports Festival served as a great cover-up for this gathering, there was still a small chance that there were villains sharp enough to notice them. Not like Aizawa knew exactly why he was here, though. "Heroes, a few of you are aware of the train accident that happened a few weeks ago," 𝗵𝗲 began in a solid, supported voice as he gestured at the photos in the presentation. "But for the sake of those who are not, I will summarize what happened. At 23 hours on Friday last week, there was a sudden bright light accompanied by a strange energy surge." He pointed at a map. "In this location, that surge scrambled all nearby electronic devices, causing a train crossing Musutafu to derail itself. Fortunately, there were no casualties in the accident." "No casualties?" Aizawa pondered out loud. "I struggle to see how that is possible." "There is a very good explanation for that, Eraserhead. Sir Night took over for 𝗵𝗲. When All Might and I were called onto the scene, witnesses mentioned an invisible force stopping the train dead in its tracks before it could crash. He also witnessed a small figure escaping into the distance." The projection promptly flipped to a video, showing a human-like figure scurrying off at an incredible speed. Aizawa would have creased his eyebrows, if not for the bandages holding 90% of his face in place. "Scientists have taken samples of the scorched soil near where the light was, and yielded these results," 𝗵𝗲 continued, giving the heroes some time to take in the information. "The Hero Public Safety Commission is rather concerned about this issue, and would like us heroes to be prepared to step in. A wave of unease spread throughout the room as the heroes collectively shifted with discomfort at the last slide of the presentation. Are we sure there's no other plausible explanation? Midnight was the first to speak up. Surely that can't be the final conclusion, right? Come now, 𝐒𝐭𝐴𝐲, Present Mike blurted out. Elements that do not belong to this planet. Energy readings that defy simple physics. Hell, even I would have come to the same conclusion. Look at me. I'm an animal with a quirk, Principal Nezu said solemnly as his mouse whiskers twitched. In our world where 80% of our population have supernatural powers, is it really too far-fetched to say that extraterrestrials exist? Endeavor let out a low grunt, shaking his head. Why are we discussing this in the first place? He said in a gruff voice. Alien or not, this creature has not posed any threat to us yet. And even if it does, we have enough heroes and security to subdue just one being. This meeting is a waste of my time. It would serve you well to play nice with others. Number 2. Sir Night-Eye stood up, clearly unintimidated by the burly hero. Besides, we have no further information about this being. We must keep our guard up in case it turns out to be hostile. Or worse, stronger than all of us. Aizawa remained silent, deep in thought about the whole situation. Something was nagging at him. The timing was a perfect coincidence, to say the least. Too perfect, in fact. He needed to properly analyze what had happened, but he has had no time thus far. What with the preparation of the sports festival and all. The teacher glanced at the clock as Present Mike started getting out of his seat from beside him. This was not the time for pause and reflection either. The games must continue for now. Mental prison chapter text. While the others were having fun with the recreational games, those who were involved in the tournament could not afford to relax. Some polished their strategy against their upcoming opponents. Others tried to keep their presence of mind. Some prepared for the fight. Some sharpened their senses, and some tried to relax their nerves by socializing with their fellow competitors. Izuku sat across from Felix in the changing room. Both of them opened their mouths to speak at the same time, so Izuku motioned Felix to begin first. The matchups are out, the exchange student began in a serious voice. The boy you're fighting, Shinso, he has some kind of telepathic power to command your body. So I've noticed. Izuku nodded, recalling Ajiro's dazed look. But how did you shake yourself out of it? I'm psychic, so I can naturally resist mental assaults, Felix replied, tapping his head lightly. I believe his power requires you to answer a question he asks before it can activate, so don't engage in conversation with him. Precisely. Izuku tilted his head down, deep in thought. You resisted his attacks with brute force, but how was Ajiro shaken out of it? He was awake after you hit him with your power. Was that your doing? That attack was a purely psychokinetic hit. Felix shook his head. There was no telepathic component to it. If I were to wager a guess, I'd say he woke up after a hit to the head. There's going to be no one to wake me up out there, so I cannot fall victim to his brainwashing, Izuku reminded himself. I can't afford to make any mistakes. Felix patted him on his back encouragingly. Win this for us, Izuku. He grinned. Show the arrogant boy that Class 1A is deserving of your spot in this school. Oh, one more thing. Felix, I need you to do a favor for me. Felix raised his eyebrow at Izuku. Todoroki is burdened by his father's wishes. I'm sure you know that he is the number 2 hero, Endeavor. Todoroki wishes to reject his father's flame power and win the tournament with a mere half of his full power. Izuku looked up at Felix. You're going to battle him in your first round. I have seen for myself how strong you are. And I know Todoroki will probably not make it to the next round. What are you trying to get at, Midoriya? I probably won't get to face him myself, so. Izuku's voice dropped. Shake him out of the mindset for me, will you? Save him from his own turmoil. No one deserves to lose the chance to be a hero because of his past. You really have the heart of a true hero, don't you? Felix let out a short smirk, shaking his head. Very well. As you wish, Izuku. The finals that you've all been waiting for are finally starting. Present Mike roared from the stands. Even though he's done well so far, what's with that face? From the hero course, it's Izuku Midoriya. Felix squinted from his seat in the stands, even though he could barely see Izuku's expression from that distance. He could already imagine how nervous his friend must have been looking. Sorry, he hasn't done anything to stand out yet. Present Mike continued. From general studies, it's Hitoshi Shinso. The rules are simple. Force your opponent out of bounds or immobilize them. You can also win by making your opponent yield. The purple-haired boy stood on the other end of the cement-filled stage with a smug look on his face. Bring on the injuries, because we've got our very own recovery girl waiting on standby. Felix glanced at the picture of a pint-sized old lady dressed in a doctor's lab coat. There was a small infographic which read, Quirk, Heal. Her quirk allows her to amplify and speed up the human body's natural healing process by planting a kiss on the injured person. Well, that's convenient. But of course, anything life-threatening is not allowed. Present Mike's voice rang out. Heroes should only use their fists to catch villains. I'll stop things if they go too far. Midnight signaled for the match to begin, and Izuku immediately charged towards the general studies student. Felix leaned forward, observing closely as his classmate leapt nimbly around Shinso. There was no doubt that he was physically athletic, but he was still not using his quirk for some reason. Felix frowned, wondering why Izuku was so intent on hiding the full power of his quirk. You know nothing about them. Izuku's hysterical yell burst out all of a sudden, catching the attention of even those at the far end of the stadium. Oh no. Hey, what's the matter? The MC called out. Midoriya is suddenly frozen. He's following orders like a good boy. Felix slumped back into his seat in despair, watching Izuku slowly walk towards the boundary of the stage. Despite having his guard up, Izuku must have still fallen victim to Shinso's taunts. The psychic clenched his fists in frustration. There was still so much he needed to see, but it seemed like Izuku was going to lose this match without putting up much of a fight. A gust of wind burst from Izuku's fingers, shocking everyone in the crowd. Whoa! Midoriya managed to stop himself by breaking his own fingers. Present Mike screamed like he was about to lose his mind. Yes, Felix leapt from his seat in excitement as well, turning the tables at the last moment. Tenya cheered, a classic Midoriya move. Izuku covered his mouth with his hand, forcing Shinso towards the edge of the field and flipped him out of bounds without another word. Shinso is out. Midoriya advances to the next round. Midnight announced the final verdict as the purple-haired boy stood back up to his feet. The two competitors shared a few words before heading back to their respective rooms. Felix's phone rang as Ochako hopped over to his seat, psyched up to discuss the match with Tenya and him. He excused himself to take the call, leaving Tenya to entertain Ochako as well as the rest of their classmates. He glanced at the unknown number on his phone again. The boy's face fell. You're acting disgracefully, Shoto. If you used the power on your left side, you would have had an overwhelming victory in the obstacle course and the cavalry battle. Stop this childish rebellion already. You have a duty to surpass All Might. Felix groaned internally at the recognizable voice. You're different from your siblings. Endeavor continued berating his son. You are my greatest masterpiece. Do you understand? Is that all you can say, bastard? Todoroki was sounding even angrier than usual. I will win and advance with just Mom's power. I won't use your power in a fight. All right, screw this. I'm getting out of here. Felix walked out of the washroom in full view of the feuding family. Todoroki shot him an angry look before storming out of the place. Felix put his phone back in his pocket silently. Endeavor released a loud, drawn sigh. Children these days are so rude, he said, looking straight at the boy. They never try to understand the intentions of the adults. You're in my way, sir. Felix's voice was coated in sarcasm and mock respect. I believe we may have gotten off on the wrong foot. Endeavor forced a smile that looked like it fractured half of his face in the process. I may have underestimated your capabilities, Felix Paganus. You don't have to work under me. I'm inviting you to be a direct associate of my hero agency. We can work together as equals. How about that? Why are you so intent on recruiting me to your cause? Game recognizes game, the man said, keeping his hand outstretched. A Greece exchange student who got here by recommendation. You must have connections with someone famous. Who is it? Pancration. Felix shot him a cold look. That's none of your business. Besides, I have other plans, so I'm gonna have to reject that offer. If you say so. That's too bad for you, Endeavor replied. I trust you will do your best to beat Shoto in the upcoming match. It is his duty to surpass All Might, and you'll be a good stepping stone for him. I don't know if you've noticed, but Shoto isn't you. The psychic glared at the man. Whatever your personal feud with All Might, leave him out of this. You don't really care about what's best for him, you only care about what you want. Typical. The flames on Endeavor's body seemed to burn brighter as he simmered in anger at the boy's insolence. I'm done here, hero. Out of my way. The Hero Killer chapter text. The two recommendation students stood on opposite corners, waiting for Present Mike to finish hyping them up. Todoroki's expression was darker than his shadow in the sweltering afternoon sun, while Felix kept his arms folded with a cheery expression on his face. Let's put on a show, shall we? The psychic grinned at his opponent just as the air horn blasted. Todoroki responded by taking the offensive, sweeping a rageful blast of ice at his opponent. A gigantic wall of ice covered the opposite half of the field, sweeping past the audience line and poked out of the entire stadium. The crowd went silent at the overwhelming display of raw power. The shivering Midnight raised her flag, preparing to announce Todoroki's instant victory. Ha! Ha! Todoroki flinched at the creepy laughter emanating from the iceberg. It sounded as though the very ice itself was speaking. Very well played. The vibrations in the ice were somehow being manipulated in a way that imitated human speech. But not good enough. It burst into pieces without warning, blowing the ice user back with the sheer power of the explosive force. Todoroki grunted as he stopped himself from going out of bounds with a block of ice supporting his back. Two glowing points of pink illuminated Felix's smirk as he stepped out of the ice menacingly. Todoroki sent another line of ice at him, His opponent swatted his hand casually, vaporizing the ice. I noticed something about your power, Todoroki, Felix said as the surrounding ice began levitating around him. You can only create ice, but you cannot telekinetically manipulate it, can you? Todoroki stepped back in shock. That's too bad for you. He reacted quickly, encasing himself in an igloo. It saved him. Chunks of ice pelted against the igloo like a freak hailstorm as he frantically generated more ice, racing against time to reinforce his frozen shield. A fist burst into the igloo without warning. Todoroki choked as Felix seized him by the neck and tossed him to the other end of the field again. Ice burst from his feet as he skated in a graceful arc, landing on the floor safely. Felix moved forward with blinding speed, but the ice user was prepared this time. Big mistake, 𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗵𝗲. Todoroki grabbed his opponent's wrist and encased his whole body in ice. Frosty air escaped his lips, his body temperature dangerously low. He had overexerted himself, but at least he had immobilized his opponent for now. He still needed some time to recover before the world spun around him as a fist greeted his jaw squarely. Todoroki crashed hard on the ground. He coughed, the taste of iron rapidly filling his mouth. The boy scrambled backwards from his opponent in shock. He had not expected him to break out of the ice so quickly. Blows rained all around him repeatedly as Felix moved in a blur. Todoroki tried to dodge the hits, but was only punished with even heavier blows on his open flesh. His vision darkened quickly. Martial arts too. What kind of training did this freak out? This is bad. I'm losing consciousness. The beatdown stopped abruptly as though in response to his plea, and Todoroki's vision slowly focused itself again. Felix's hand was outstretched, now telekinetically holding him up. Todoroki struggled, kicking against the air futilely. My, Shoto Todoroki, when will you come to your senses? Felix chuckled darkly, almost sounding like a villain by this point. When will you realize that you are hopelessly outmatched? The psychic flicked his hand, slamming the boy to the ground again. How can you stand up to a villain if you can't even stand up to your left side? Felix roared, tossing him closer to the boundary line. How dare you call yourself a hero who only uses half his power? I won't. Let him win. Todoroki gritted his teeth, struggling to get to his feet. He screamed in desperation, blasting yet another beam of ice back at his opponent. A pink beam of psionic energy clashed with the ice, pushing it back towards the boy. Pathetic. Todoroki's feet slid backwards slowly as the psychic pushed him back with his own ice. His breath picked up its pace as his eyes shook in fear. He was almost out of bounds by now. The boy's eyes flitted to his left side. You're still refusing to acknowledge your father's power, aren't you? Felix was now close enough to whisper to him. Who are you, really? Are you merely 𝗵𝗲𝗏's son? The mist cleared for a brief moment, and he locked eyes with his opponent. Or are you, Shoto Todoroki? Enough. Fire exploded from Todoroki's left side, accompanied by his yell. The ice melted instantly, and Felix leapt backwards from the licking flames. Puddles of water boiled away as the heat seared through the entire field. You've made your point, Felix, Todoroki croaked in a raspy voice, but a small smile was hanging on his lips. What a beautiful power. Felix leaned against his force field, taking the time to admire the cacophony of colors painting the air. Finally, it's showtime. Have it you, Shoto. 𝗵𝗲𝗏's yell butted in randomly from the stands. Have you finally accepted yourself? That's it. Good. It all starts from here for you. With my blood, you will surpass me. You will fulfill my desire. The boys ignored him, clashing in a brilliant dance of fire and ice. Waves of orange and streams of white mixed in a perfectly balanced concoction of chaos and elegance. Streaks of pink trailed behind the playful figure dancing around in the colorful portrait, weaving elegantly between the ice and fire. The crowd cheered, thoroughly entertained by the spectacle. A genuine laugh of joy escaped Todoroki's lips. All his life, he was forced to use his quirk only for the purpose of training. Poisoned by the toxic ideals of his father, he had almost forgotten how much he enjoyed his powers. He slid to the side and pointed his left side at the back of his opponent. Thank you, Felix. Fire exploded from his palm. It was over. Well done, Todoroki. But the show's over. The boy turned back in shock as Felix vanished in a flash, reappearing from behind him. A pained gasp burst from his mouth as the sonic beam struck his back, blasting him out of boundaries immediately. He crashed into the stadium wall, and everything faded to black. Congratulations for the win. That might have been the scariest match I have ever watched. Izuku greeted Felix as the boy returned to the player waiting room. Is Todoroki all right? Felix chuckled, putting his hand on his head sheepishly. He's just knocked out. I didn't hit him that hard. You were terrifying, 𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗏. Tenya walked into the room as well, closing the door behind him. I'm actually worried for Midoriya now. With both of you advancing to the next round, you'll be fighting each other very soon. Thank you for breaking Todoroki's shackles for me. Izuku hung his head. I know I probably don't stand a chance against you, but I'll do my best. Ochako slumped on the table as her face further contorted itself. What's up with her? Felix asked. Don't you know? She's going up against Kakin next. Izuku patted her gently. It's a shame she's on the other side of the bracket, or we would actually get to battle each other. Calm yourself, Uraraka. Tenya walked up to her. I don't think even Bakugo would use a full-powered explosion on a girl. Actually, he would. Izuku took out his hero notebook again, looking at it intensely. Everyone's trying to become number one, to make their dreams come true. It's not just Kaken. No one would think about holding back. The boy handed his notebook to her. You've helped me so much, Uraraka. That's why I thought maybe I could help you a little. A plan to use your quirk against Kaken, Izuku said. It's rough, but I came up with something. There was a pregnant pause as Ochako stared at the book. Thanks, Deku. But it's fine. Tenya and Felix looked at her in surprise. You're amazing, Deku. I keep seeing more and more amazing sides to you. During the cavalry battle, I told you that it'd be easier to team up with friends, she said solemnly. But now that I think about it, I might have just been trying to rely on you. Uraraka. Izuku tilted his head down slightly. That's why it's fine. Everyone's facing the future and trying their hardest. Conviction glowed on the girl's face as she pumped her fists. Let's meet in the finals. Bravo. What a rousing speech. Tenya chopped the air approvingly again, but a loud buzz interrupted him. He took out his phone, staring at a message as his face fell considerably. What is it, Ada? It's my brother, Tensei, Tenya replied quietly. He texted me to apologize for not being able to watch my upcoming match. Tensei has just left his agency for a very important mission. Are you worried about him? Izuku asked in a concerned voice. Not in the least. He is in 𝗔𝗵𝗄, after all. Tenya smiled brightly. But it was obvious that he was hiding his true feelings. He's been assigned to apprehend a criminal called the Hero Killer, a vicious man who killed over 40 heroes. I can't wait for him to return and bring us the good news. You really admire him, don't you? Ochako said brightly. Another beeping phone notification came in as well, and Felix stepped out to take the call. Everyone's so busy with phone calls, Izuku commented as Ochako stretched. Well, go ahead and prepare yourself, Uraraka. We'll be wishing you all the best. Izuku stepped out of the room and looked around at the empty long corridor. He tilted his head a little in confusion before leaving the place. Felix sure left the hallway quickly, didn't he? To be a true hero chapter text Hasu City was unusually quiet at this hour. But at least it made his job all the more easier. 𝗔𝗵𝗄 sprinted along the streets, checking every corner for his quarry. Tensei Ada steadied his breaths. The hero killer was not a simple criminal to be taken lightly. He had to be in tip-top form if he wanted to apprehend that serial murderer. Squad A, go north. Squad B, check the west side. He barked into the inbuilt radio in his helmet. Their affirmative replies came in swiftly, and the hero increased his pace. With luck, the hero killer should still be in this city. And it was high time someone put this psycho behind bars. He caught a familiar flash of steel from the corner of his eye. 𝗔𝗵𝗄 braked hard, leaping off the alley walls. There was no doubt this time. He had found the hero killer. Nowhere left to run. Stain. The hero landed in front of the solitary man. Stain looked up slowly, his red scarf billowing in the wind. A stray ray of sunlight glinted off his blood-stained knife as the noseless man faced the hero. Tensei's eyes flitted to the dead man lying against the alley wall. He did not recognize him, but the corpse was most probably once a hero, judging from the costume it was wearing, and with the wound in his chest as well as the knife in Stain's hand. There was no longer any doubt that he was the latest in the long list of the hero killer's murders. 𝗔𝗵𝗄 lunged at Stain without a further word. The hero killer dodged his attack with ease, leaping to the side and using the wall to push himself back at the hero. The knife sliced the air as Tensei dodged the blade with a smooth somersault. The hero seized the opportunity, aiming a follow-up kick at the criminal's gut. He released a grunt of pain as the knife plunged into his leg instead. The hero killer pulled the knife out, murderous intent dancing in his eyes as he licked the blood off his weapon. 𝗔𝗵𝗄 gritted his teeth in both pain and disgust. What kind of sick criminal? His body collapsed to the ground all of a sudden, paralyzed for some strange reason. He willed his body to crawl on the floor, but it seemed like every single muscle in his body was refusing to budge. A choked scream burst from his mouth as he felt cold steel sink into his back. Fame, money. They're all calling themselves heroes. The hero killer finally deigned to speak. But you bastards aren't heroes. There's just one hero. The only one I'll let kill me is All Might. 𝗔𝗵𝗄 groaned, blood gurgling in his vocal cords. You haven't even noticed. This warped society is stained with hypocrisy and vanity. Stain continued his monologue as he raised his knife for the killing blow. To all who are called heroes, I will make you notice. A dark figure crashed into him from nowhere, sending the criminal flying. Tensei squinted at his savior through his rapidly darkening vision. The figure was dressed in dark purple and was seeming to move on all fours. Its overflowing cape rippled in the wind as it darted around the alley at an extreme speed, relentlessly pelting Stain with blows. Weightlessness seized the hero without warning as he felt himself soaring in the air. The unknown creature set him down on a rooftop, before crouching at its ledge as though observing something. What are you? Tensei managed to squeeze out a whisper. The masked creature stood up, revealing itself to be a bipedal being. It slowly walked towards him and placed a hand on his forehead. Fog encroached his mind as a sudden sleepiness took him. The hero struggled to keep his eyes open, just in time to see the figure leap off the building and disappear into the clouds with a sonic boom. 𝗵𝗲𝗄𝐵's head rolled to the side limply as his eyelids finally fell shut. Izuku barely noticed Felix re-entering the stands after his seemingly long call. He was too preoccupied worrying about Achako's well-being. Although she had not suffered any serious injuries from her fight with Bakugo, there was no way she was not frustrated at the outcome of the match. So, what'd I miss? Felix asked from behind him. Bakugo played the bad guy just like you did. Kaminari answered the question for Izuku. But at least you were going up against Todoroki. Man, I still can't believe he was able to aim such a huge blast at a frail girl. I couldn't help but hold back against that cute vine lady myself. Her name is Shizaki and she completely overpowered you. Kaminari, Tsu added nonchalantly as the blonde boy cringed with embarrassment. You didn't have to say that out loud. Kaminari mumbled. Gravity can be deadly if used correctly. Felix shrugged. I don't blame Bakugo for going all out. If it were a real-life situation, Achako could have easily killed him with a single drop if she had managed to touch him. Wow, you almost sound like Midoriya. Tsu laughed. Izuku looked up in response to his name being called as Felix walked towards him with an outstretched hand. No hard feelings, okay. Felix grinned. Let's have a good fight, Izuku. No holds barred. Izuku nodded firmly. It's Midoriya's second match against someone with a psychic-type quirk. What will he do this time? Present Mike yelled. Midoriya versus Paganus. Ready, start. He's practically invincible when it comes to defensive moves. But I'll at least stand a chance if I can land a clean hit before he can react. Power charged in his finger as Izuku Midoriya opened the match with a finger flick. A powerful shockwave burst towards the psychic, striking him cleanly. The audience cheered, despite almost having their belongings blown away by the resulting win. No way. Felix was still firmly anchored to the ground with his hands behind his back. Izuku growled, rushing towards him at full speed. Energy channeled itself violently into the right side of his body. Smash! The boy slammed into his opponent at full force as half of his body turned numb instantly. Felix did not budge. Izuku staggered backwards, holding his right arm. He resisted one for all. Just how strong is he, you done? By turn, the psychic's eyes flared pink, and Izuku's body flattened against the ground with a yell. He gritted his teeth, struggling to push himself back up. It felt as though a huge slab of rubble was pressing down his back. The boy channeled his quirk into his right arm, preparing to drive it downwards. Detroit. Smash. An even larger shockwave left a crater on the ground as Felix staggered backwards from the blowback. Izuku's body spun uncontrollably in the air from the impact. But at least he was free from his opponent's telekinetic hold. This is my chance. I have to take this opportunity. The boy's feet touched the ground. It was not enough for him to regain balance, but that was not what he had in mind. You're done for. Izuku spun along with the momentum, swinging his broken arm at Felix. The full power of his quirk left the broken limb a second time as it connected with his opponent's face. Felix flailed his arms as he finally fell over his feet. Izuku focused his mind, willing the pain away. Adrenaline surged through his veins as he dragged Felix's body with his unbroken hand. This was his one chance to throw him out of bounds, and he was not about to squander it. Not that simple. Felix shook his hand off, throwing a sonic punch straight to his gut. Bile rose up in Izuku's throat as he flew towards the other end of the boundary. He struggled to get to his feet, but an invisible force dragged him towards his opponent. What are you hiding, Midoriya? Why won't you show your full power? Felix growled, slamming him headfirst into the ground. He pulled him up again, but Izuku was ready this time. Smash! Shockwaves rippled through the air as the boy threw a point-blank punch with his left hand. Felix let go of him. Izuku panted in desperation. With both his arms out of commission, there was no way he was winning this fight now. But he'll be damned if he did not try. Izuku leapt towards Felix and was promptly caught by the throat. The world spun like an uncontrolled top as Felix telekinetically toyed with his body like a crazed puppet master. The psychic sent him close to the boundary, before bringing it back to himself again. Is that really all you've got? The murderous glint in Felix's eyes was back, and it resembled that of a cold-blooded killer this time. If there's no more fight in you, why won't you give up? Tell me. Felix flung him away carelessly, apparently tired of beating him down. It's because. Izuku pushed his battered body up with his feet, stumbling about in his extreme dizziness. I want to be the greatest hero, and I'll always stand up to whoever challenges me. The silence in the stadium never felt louder. Felix folded his arms as the glow faded from his eyes. Such fortitude, hero. Consider me impressed. I have seen enough. He flicked his wrist casually, and Izuku toppled out of bounds. Unexpected twist. Chapter text. Ochako was about to wish Tenya good luck for his fight against Felix when she noticed his trembling body. His phone slipped out of his hand, and she dived forward to catch it before it hit the ground. "Ada, what's wrong?" She returned the phone to her friend, whose face was as pale as the wall behind him. "My brother, Tensei." His voice wavered. "He's in the hospital. A villain got him." The girl took a step back, her hand flying to her mouth in shock. "Oh gosh, are you all right?" She stretched out a hand to Tenya. "How's he doing?" "I don't know the details, so I'm going to go visit him directly." The boy forced a smile at her. Ingenium is a likable hero who honors the rules and leads people. "I set my sights on being a hero because I want to be like my brother." "Ada, don't worry about me, Uraraka. I'll be just fine." Tenya nodded firmly as he headed to the back of the stadium. "I'm sorry about how sudden this is, but I must leave early. Send my best wishes to Felix for his final match against Bakugo." Ochako watched the back of her friend slowly shrink as he walked away. At that moment, she wanted to call out to him, to assure him that they would be there for him if he was ever feeling hopeless. But he was gone before she could. Go Beyond, Plus Ultra. The video stopped playing as Felix's lips started to curve downwards. He set his phone down after a few seconds with a frown deep enough to drown a city. So this big man really was going to be his main target. How poetic. His memories flitted back to the abandoned castle, back to his sister, back to the man who killed her in cold blood just to progress his experiment. Much like All Might and Izuku, Marcia's murderer possessed super strength as well, and that only served to fuel his ruthless ambitions. The room began vibrating as emotions swirled within the boy. To hell with leaving the past where it belonged. If destroying this hero society was the only path to his goal, then this world shall burn. A beeping noise interrupted his thoughts, and the furniture in the room fell back to the ground. He picked up his phone. "I thought I told you not to call me so often, Doctor," Felix grunted into the earpiece. "You risk exposing me with each call." A different voice greeted him this time. His face visibly lightened up after the caller finished his piece. "Good to know that we still have some time. Izuku Midoriya is still nowhere near All Might's power level yet," he said. "Not to worry, none of the US students pose a threat to your plans. Now, about my end of this partnership." The boy listened intently, before releasing a loud exhale. "Fair enough. I'll continue to be your eyes and ears in this school while you prepare what's rightfully mine. And another thing, Paganus, do make some time after your sports festival. I have a couple of associates you might want to meet. Just let me know when. All for one." Felix put down his phone with a hardened look in his eyes. The door burst open. Felix swung his head, his eyes dancing frantically in fear at the student glaring at him. "Oh no, did he overhear my phone conversation?" "Huh." Katsuki Bakugo growled with his foot still outstretched. "Hey, why are you here?" Felix looked at him in confusion, before pointing wordlessly at the door sign, which read Player 2 Waiting Room. "Oh, this is Waiting Room 2. Damn it." Bakugo sauntered towards the boy, his face full of irritation. "I may have gotten the room wrong, but that doesn't mean I'll go easy on you, Phoenix." "It's Felix." Felix sighed, trying to hide the relief in his voice. "Here's to a fun match, Kakin." "Don't call me that, psycho," Bakugo yelled. "I'm not here to have fun. I'm here to win and prove indisputably that I am the strongest there is. So you better bring your all to this match too, you hear me? This guy's vocal cords must be made of steel or something. Doesn't he ever stop yelling?" "Thanks for the pep talk, Bakugo." Felix smirked. "I'll give you a good fight." "Ladies and gentlemen, it's finally time for the last battle of the UA High School Sports Festival." President Mike roared without a hint of fatigue in his voice. "The top of the first years will be decided with this one match. From this corner, we have Katsuki Bakugo, a ruthless opponent with an overwhelming declaration of victory. He has brutally beaten down his competition thus far, and he doesn't look like he'll be stopping soon." Bakugo was looking unusually calm this time, with a completely neutral expression that betrayed not even a hint of murderous intent. And on the other side, we have Felix Paganus, an unbelievably powerful Esper who has effortlessly demolished everything coming his way. "Is he even human?" Felix motioned to Bakugo with a small smile. "I hope you brought a change of pants, because this match is going to be the shit." His opponent did not laugh at his corny joke. What happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object? Find out in this battle. President Mike finished up his introduction. "Now, start." Felix braced himself for Bakugo's aggressive offense. But the boy was standing still. Focus hardened Bakugo's face as he raised a hand, motioning Felix to approach him instead. "He obviously has a counterattack lined up for me." The psychic smirked. "That's pretty smart of him. All right, let's see what you've got." He burst forward at a blistering speed and watched Bakugo swing his right hand forward. The deafening blast rang in his ears as his opponent released an explosion with the power of at least 5 grenades. But it was still too slow. What? Bakugo turned around in shock, and Felix took a moment to savor the terror in his eyes. A beam of psychic energy slammed into Bakugo from behind, knocking him straight into the air. Clusters of explosion rained down on the whole field, and Felix immediately shielded himself with a psychic bubble. Bakugo had somehow managed to halt himself mid-air, and was now throwing down as many explosions as he could onto his opponent. There was another blinding light, and the field practically cracked in half from the huge and final explosion. Such brutal moves, President Mike yelled. Bakugo finishes his combo with the same explosion that 𝐂𝐻𝐢𝐳. Poor thing. Bakugo finally landed on the floor, panting hard and wincing as he held his shoulder in pain. He grinned, slowly raising his hand in victory. Wind blasted without warning, clearing all the smoke out in an instant. Bakugo tensed his body apprehensively. Felix was completely unharmed, protected by his force field, and despite all the destruction Bakugo had wrought, he had only managed to put a small crack on his opponent's shield. The psychic tilted his head up suddenly with a creepy smile. Felix darted erratically, as though he was the main antagonist of a horror show. His fist connected with Bakugo's hard jaw, and his opponent flinched in pain as he staggered backwards. The boy did not let up, zipping around his opponent in a flurry of motion. Bakugo swung his hands wildly in response. It was obvious that he was trying to feel out a pattern to the attack, but Felix was not giving him the pleasure of counter-attacking him. The boy cackled wildly. The air horn blared. 𝗵𝗃 is out of bounds. Bakugo is the final winner. A wave of silence seized the crowd at the abrupt end to the match, before they started clapping awkwardly. Bakugo groggily got up to his feet as Felix threw his hands up in surrender, walking back to the stands. No, not like this. Bakugo somehow still had the energy to scream after his retreating opponent. You threw the match on purpose, didn't you? Come back, 𝗵𝗃. This isn't over. I won't accept this victory. Felix ignored him, heading into the darkness with an expressionless look on his face. A foreboding conclusion chapter text. Mr. Aizawa walked along the corridors, turning a corner briskly. He still had some time before the awards ceremony. President Mike was merciful enough not to bother him any further once their commentary job was over. Still, time was quickly running out, and he had to make this trip count. Darkness greeted the teacher as he opened the door to the deserted staff room. There was no time to do a thorough analysis, but the nagging feeling would not go away if he did not verify his suspicions now. His fingers closed around a sheet of plastic, and he pulled out a file labeled Felix 𝗵𝗃. Aizawa flipped open the student record, reading through every line and column carefully. Apparently, 𝗵𝗃 High was Felix's high school back in Greece, and he was a first-year student there as well. There are no other details listed in the record other than his score in the recommendation admissions test as well as his reference. Who was the famous hero, Pancration? The teacher kept the file, releasing a drawn-out sigh. Felix's rapid movements during the school festival were eerily similar to the creature in the footage of 𝗬𝗵𝗲's presentation, but everything on his record seemed clean enough. Moreover, the timing did not add up if Felix actually passed the admissions tests. Strong as his gut feeling might be, there simply was not enough evidence to insinuate that Felix was that very same extraterrestrial. Shota, what are you doing here? Shouldn't you be at the stadium grounds? Aizawa turned to Principal Nezu, who had managed to enter the room silently enough to avoid his notice. It's nothing much. Just, Aizawa's voice trailed away. I've been wondering, Principal, how did Felix 𝗵𝗃 get recommended into this school? Why, he's a brilliant student who has the potential to be a great hero, of course. Nezu climbed onto the table. Do you have a problem with it? Not at the moment. Aizawa chose his words carefully. He was assigned to my class before I had time to screen him, so I'm naturally curious about who he is. That's all. Nezu peeked at the student record as well. As you can see here, his record is clean. There's nothing to worry about, Nezu said cheerily. Like I said, he's a brilliant student who has the potential to be a great hero. The principal closed the file and kept it in the drawer. Aizawa caught a flicker of pink flashing in his eyes for a brief moment, but it quickly vanished as though it was a mere trick of the light. He took out his eye drops and dripped the solution in his eyes again. His injuries from the USJ attack were really making him see things. Now Shota, I believe you have an award ceremony to attend, Bakugo muttered to himself, kicking his feet in irritation while he walked along the corridor. The awards ceremony was about to begin, but he sure as hell was not going to accept the medal. There was no way he deserved it, not without a rematch with that idiot 𝗵𝗃. Why did he choose to beat Todoroki and that damn nerd, Deku, but not me? The frustration within him was growing like a balloon being pumped up at a children's party. Small sparks crackled from his palms as his veins lit up with anger once again. Damn it, is that bastard actually looking down on me? He thinks I'm some kind of extra now, doesn't he? Yes, it's already over. I hope the information I've provided is plenty enough for now. That voice. Bakugo stopped in his tracks right outside the bathroom door. He wanted more than anything to barge in and confront Paganus for indirectly forfeiting the match. But it was rude to interrupt a call, so he had to settle with waiting outside impatiently for the call to end. The boy pressed his ear to the door, listening intently for the end of Felix's conversation. I still don't understand your obsession with Izuku, Felix's voice continued. If you want the symbol of peace gone, I can directly kill All Might for you. Why go through all this trouble for his protege who hasn't even matured yet? Bakugo's eyes widened in shock. That was all he needed to hear. You traitor. He kicked open the door, aiming his hand at the figure. The lights went out immediately, and he had to physically restrain himself from accidentally blowing up the entire washroom. Bakugo tilted his head as the washroom door slammed shut behind him. He was fighting blind now, but he kept his arm up cautiously. Like hell he would let some pathetic darkness stop him from apprehending that bastard traitor. Sparks danced around his fingertips. A slight breeze rushed past the back of his neck, and he swung around immediately. Bakugo smirked. Paganus always favored attacking from the back. Anyone would have been able to deduce that by now. That won't work on me twice, asshole. Bakugo's hand collided with something solid, and he set off a full-powered explosion in what he assumed was Felix's face. The blast lit up the room as though the lights had come back on, and Bakugo caught a glimpse of a hand grabbing his wrist. His eyes rolled back as a foreign presence invaded his mind, snuffing out his consciousness. And as his body fell limply to the ground, the last thing he saw were 2 points of pink. All of the first-year events for this year's U.S. Sports Festival have been completed, Midnight announced in a chirpy voice, as though nothing had just happened. And now, we will begin the awards ceremony. Izuku shot a concerned look over to his classmates, who pretended not to notice it. He turned to Ochako instead. Are they really not going to address why the awards ceremony was randomly postponed for an hour? He asked. Well, they did say it was due to unforeseen circumstances, Ochako replied nonchalantly. The main event is already over, so I suppose the audience would be more understanding. The expression on Izuku's face did not change. Ever since the League of Villains invaded the USJ so brazenly, there was always a chance that they may attack 𝐒𝐴 again. He could just be paranoid, but he could not shake off the nagging feeling within him that they are still out there, waiting for their moment to strike. It's time to award the medals. The presentation of the medals will, of course, be by this man, our very own hero, All Might. It's All Might. Izuku broke into a wide smile as his idol's presence washed away his worries. All Might received the medals from Midnight, and began hanging them on Tokoyami, Felix, and Bakugo. Although Tokoyami and Felix were receiving their medals happily, a dazed look was hanging on Bakugo's face, almost as though his mind was elsewhere. Izuku felt an uncomfortable shift from behind him, before a hand tapped his shoulder. He turned around along with the rest of his class. I'm sorry, my classmates, but I feel that I shouldn't withhold this information from you, Momo said, looking alarmingly distressed. The reason why the ceremony was postponed was because they found Bakugo unconscious in the washroom prior to the ceremony. Some classmates covered their mouths in shock. Unfortunately, he had no memory of what happened when he woke up. He claims to have been struck by a dizzy spell right after using the washroom. Izuku furrowed his eyebrows. Bakugo never had a history of fainting spells, nor did he exert himself to that point of exhaustion during the sports festival. Why would he collapse for no reason? Our teachers have no choice but to believe that he passed out due to exhaustion based on his testimony. The washroom he collapsed in was also at the camera's blind spot, so no one even saw him enter. The distraught on Momo's face intensified. Mr. Aizawa told me not to spread the news prematurely to avoid public hysteria. But as the vice class rep, I felt it was my duty to at least let you guys know. Thank you, yeah Momo, Tsu said as Class 1A comforted her. Don't worry, we won't spread this to anyone outside our class. Izuku glanced at the sports festival winners stepping down from the podium as All Might rallied the crowd for a victory cheer. At last, the sports festival had reached its triumphant conclusion. But for some reason, it felt like his troubles were just beginning. The school was given the next 2 days to recuperate from the sports festival, and many students took that chance to handle their personal matters. Tenya had been missing school ever since he went to visit his brother. Todoroki seemed more disturbed than ever, and Bakugo was in a daze for most of the time. The last day of school ended without much mishap as the students dispersed themselves for their short holiday. Felix, on the other hand, had just received his next assignment. 2 hours later, the psychic was soaring close to the clouds. Of course, the air was freezing at that height, but he did not want to risk anyone reporting a random flying figure. Felix confirmed the blinking location on his phone once more, before breaking the sound barrier with a straight nose dive. Trees rustled along with the rippling wind as the boy landed carelessly with a loud crash. He nonchalantly walked out of the crater he had just created, towards an abandoned warehouse in the distance. After all, there was no one within 100 meters that could have heard him, and his passive psychic aura protected him from most physical harm. Felix remained outside, surreptitiously studying the inside of the warehouse with his telekinetic senses. There were 2 beings in the house. At least one of them was human, although his clothes were irregularly shaped. He wasn't sure if the other was even alive, given that all he could sense was a pulsing mass of swirling gas. The boy pushed open the warehouse doors after confirming that he was not walking into an ambush of any sort. "You sure took your own sweet time to come in," the human one said in a gritty voice. Although he was dressed in casual clothes, he was covered from head to toe with hands. Felix wondered how he was even able to speak, considering that one of those many hands also served as his mask. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Felix 𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗵𝗃," the purple gas clothed in a bartender suit spoke in a soothing voice. "I bid you welcome to the League of Villains." "Stop right there, Kurogiri." Hands man pointed rudely at Felix. "You're a student, aren't you? I don't even know if I can trust you. Why should I let you join the League of Villains?" Felix was about to open his mouth when static buzzed from the television in front of them. "There's no need for alarm, 𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗵𝗲. We are all on the same side here." "Your master is correct," Shigaraki, Kurogiri added. "We should trust Jiren's judgment when it comes to recruiting members." "Whatever." 𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗵𝗏 Shigaraki straightened up his body in respect of his master, although the screen on the television remained fuzzy. "All for one?" Felix queried, turning his body to the TV as well. "Are these the associates I was supposed to meet? I was not properly informed of this arrangement. You will forgive me for the crypticness. We are, at present, a secret organization after all for one said. "As is your true identity, am I right?" Felix agreed silently. "But first, I must thank you for the invaluable information you have provided about the state of my nemesis," the faceless man continued. "It seems that although All Might has already found himself a successor, the boy is far from capable of barring my path. And that is so much less than what I can say for my own protege here." "You guys were the ones behind the USJ attack, weren't you?" Felix asked Shigaraki, the name of his organization finally ringing a bell in his head. "So what if we were?" The man replied cautiously. "I want to destroy everything that pisses me off, starting with this disgusting hero society and their warped symbol of peace. Do you share our desire?" Felix let out a small smirk. Petty as Shigaraki's conviction may seem, his own reasons for partnering with All for One were not very much different from his. "My world exiled me for exacting righteous justice. They banished me, when all I wanted to do was save my sister." The boy's expression darkened. "Heroes, forces of good. I learned, from the moment I stepped onto this soil, that none of that matters in the face of true power." Shigaraki was looking at him intently now. "My fight may be worlds apart from yours, but when it boils down to it, we're still fighting the same battle." Felix looked at the League of Villains. "And if joining you means opening a path for me to return home, to destroy all who have wronged me, then I'll look forward to our fruitful partnership." Silence rang in the empty warehouse. "HMPH, you." Shigaraki slowly raised a finger at the psychic. "I like you. Welcome aboard." A concentrated psionic beam burst from his fingers, and the man's lifeless body toppled onto the ground. Felix trudged towards the girl lying on the floor and fell to his knees. Her glassy eyes stared into nothingness as he held her close to his body. The boy sobbed silently, staining her ashen face with his tears. Movement flitted around him as the uniformed men approached the grieving boy warily. "Sergeant Felix 𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗵𝗏 of the Guardian Council, you are hereby arrested for gross misuse of meta abilities and third-degree murder," his superior said quietly, clamping the power nullifiers onto his wrists. "I'm sorry, but the law is unyielding. I have to take you in." The boy glanced at the man lying motionless on the floor with a hole in his head. Pain and regret gripped his heart. So what if he killed his sister's murderer? It did not change the fact that he had arrived too late to save her. More men surrounded him. They nudged him gently forward, still afraid that he would lash out again and kill them too. Felix did not blame them. They did not know better. They did not know he no longer had anything else to fight for. They did not know that he had already accepted the consequences of his actions. They took him away. Weeks passed without further word of his verdict as the boy spent his days in solitary confinement. It gave him plenty of time to reflect on his life, to reminisce about the good times he shared with his loved ones. He savored every one of those memories to their fullest. After all, there weren't many to begin with. Still, Felix put his mind to it, lighting up his dark cell with detailed psionic constructs of those scenes. Society may have shunned those with such accursed gifts like him, but being a metahuman had its moments. The cell doors swung open without warning, allowing the piercing sunlight to flood in. Felix blinked and instinctively shielded his eyes with his hand. He felt a few pairs of hands pull him roughly to his feet. "Get up, 𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗵𝗏," an unfamiliar rough voice said. "Your time has come." The inmate staggered along the corridors, practically dragged by the 3 wardens who had plucked him out of his cozy abode. "Are you taking me to the gallows?" he asked meekly, hoping to at least speak to someone before he met his maker at the end of a guillotine blade. "No," one of the wardens replied gruffly. "The Constitution has something else planned for you." Felix's heart leapt. Did his superior manage to get him an appeal for his case? Move. Your verdict will be pronounced. The wardens shoved him into an empty room before leaving briskly. Hope blossomed in Felix's heart once more. If all went well, he could at least pay respects to his sister's grave. If he was given a life sentence instead, he could apologize to his friends for all the trouble he had caused them. For the first time in months, life sprang forth in his eyes once more. For the first time since his sister's death, he had a reason to live again. Inmate 𝗵𝘃𝗏, a disembodied voice announced as red light flooded Felix's surroundings. There was nothing else in the room, except for a strange circular-looking device that looked like some sort of window. The boy resisted the urge to touch it. Due to your vile crimes against the sanctity of life, you were initially sentenced to death by guillotine, the voice continued. However, that sentence has been overturned by the Constitution. Sir, or ma'am, Felix called out desperately, I understand what my actions have wrought, and I accept full consequences for my crimes. But I beseech you, please spare some pity for a boy who only wishes to atone to those he wronged. If I am to spend the rest of my days behind bars, please at least grant me a few hours to settle my final affairs. Silence permeated the room, but a humming sound broke it quickly. Felix whipped his head towards the circular device in the room. It appeared to be functioning now, and a yawning darkness gazed back at him from its center. The Constitution has come to a decision. The unknown speaker droned on. Inmate 𝗵𝘃𝗏's power levels have been determined to be too high to remain in our world. As such, said inmate will be banished into the realm between realms to ensure a complete purge of his existence. Felix's eyes widened, turning back to the device. It looked more like a hungry beast to him now, eager to swallow him whole and render his entire body asunder. Anguish flooded him as he berated himself. He was a fool to believe that the law would spare him any mercy. He was a fool to even harbor hope that there was any sense of justice in the law. The boy clenched his fists as pink covered his hate-filled eyes. Why should he be subject to the law if it had failed to save his sister? Why should he obey the authorities anymore if it was so willing to ignore his merits as a law enforcer himself? Carrying out 𝗵𝘃𝗏's sentence, the automated voice grated his ears. Time of death, 1300 hours. The nullifiers around his wrist shattered violently, overloaded by the sheer turbulence of his meta power. Like hell, I'm dying here, Felix roared as he felt the sudden immense pull of the machine. Pink coated his body as he willed himself forward, desperately trying to escape the equivalent gravity of a small star focused entirely on his body. No, damn you. Psionic energy flared uncontrollably as his body was slowly dragged backwards. He turned his attention to the device instead, attempting to crush it with his psychokinesis. Gods damn you all. I won't go quietly. To hell with you. Sparks flew around the room as a cacophony of colors ran through the gaping maw of the machine. Felix roared with effort, squeezing harder than ever. Bright yellow blinked momentarily in the yawning hole as cracks spread through the malfunctioning device, but the hole had already touched the boy's feet. A pained scream burst from Felix as the gravitational pull was magnified by hundreds of times instantly, sucking him into its hungry maw. The world warped around him, and he was flung into darkness. Felix landed back in Musutafu City after a brief detour in the sky. The memory of his past was still painfully vivid in his mind, which had almost caused him to enter the airspace of Shibuya City instead. He hated that memory, but the talk with Shigaraki had brought it back for some reason. His eyes hardened as he crossed the streets of this foreign world. The gods had decided to give him a second chance in life, and he will not squander this opportunity to make things right. Nothing will stand in my way. Purpose chapter text. So many people talked to me on my way here. Yeah, me too. You are really is amazing. Izuku joined in the chatter as his classmates chirped excitedly about how they had pretty much turned into celebrities overnight. After all, everyone was thrust right into the spotlight after the sports festival, especially since it was also broadcasted on live television. Hey Felix, welcome back. Izuku smiled at his friend, who had managed to step into the classroom just as the first bell rang. How was your commute here? Did everyone recognize you as well? Oh yeah, they sure did, Felix mumbled, clearly disinterested in the topic. You're late, Paganus. Tenya marched up to the boy's seat with a stern look on his face. You students should always arrive 10 minutes early. Felix shrugged indifferently, putting his head on his desk. Izuku hesitated to call out to his friend. He really wanted to show him some support, but he wasn't sure if this was the right time to put a band-aid on Tenya's very open wound. If it's about my brother, there is no cause for concern. Tenya smiled warmly at him, as though he had read his mind. Everything is all right. I apologize for worrying you needlessly. I guess he's still in denial, huh? Izuku pursed his lips, restraining himself from probing further. It was obvious that Tenya was still in a lot of pain. After all, who would be fine after hearing that his brother was going to be paralyzed for life? He had heard over the news about the incident involving Ingenium in Hasu City, Tokyo. The escaped culprit had already killed 17 heroes in the past and maimed 23 more beyond recovery. The elusive hero killer, whose villain name was Stain, was that same criminal who had shattered Ingenium's spine permanently. Izuku glanced at the class rep busying himself with maintaining order in the class. I really do hope you're okay, Ida. Morning, class. Mr. Aizawa strode into the classroom, and everyone fell silent immediately. Usually, that would be because of how strict he is, but this time, it was because of his physical appearance. Ribbit, Mr. Aizawa, your bandages are gone. Sue was the first to speak up. I'm glad you made a full recovery. The old lady went overboard with her treatment. Aizawa sounded as though he was repressing a loud sigh. More importantly, we're having a special hero informatics class today. Apprehension swept through the class. Code names. You'll be coming up with hero names. The class cheered in excitement, and the teacher calmed them down with a menacing glare. This is related to the pro hero draft picks I mentioned the other day. The drafts begin in earnest in the second and third years, after students have gained experience and can become immediate assets to the pros. Aizawa flashed a bar graph on the class board. In other words, for them to extend offers to first years like you shows that they are interested in your future potential. However, these offers are often cancelled if that interest dies down by graduation. Huh? Izuku scratched his head at the graph. Felix, how come you didn't get any? You came in second in the sports festival. He's an exchange student, so he doesn't qualify for internships in Japan. Aizawa answered the question for him. Perhaps 𝗵𝗃𝗄𝐴 has different plans for you, Paganus. After all, they have not contacted me regarding this issue. Izuku creased his eyebrows. There was a certain unusual sharpness to Mr. Aizawa's tone, almost as if he was interrogating a criminal. Felix mumbled, fidgeting slightly. Oh, yeah, I'll just be going home for that week, I suppose. As for the rest of you, you will all be participating in internships with pros, regardless of whether or not anyone asked for you, Aizawa continued. At USJ, you already got to experience combat with real villains, but it will still be meaningful training for you to see pros at work firsthand. Those hero names are still temporary. The teacher droned on, but he picked up his sleeping bag from the floor again for some reason. But if you're not serious about it, you'll have hell to pay later. The class perked up at the familiar sultry voice. Because a lot of hero names used by students become recognized by society, they end up becoming professional hero names. Midnight sauntered into the classroom, and Izuku's eyebrows merged with his hairline. Miss Midnight, Minda wailed from behind him as though the gods had answered all his prayers at once. So that's how it is. Midnight will be making sure your names are okay, Aizawa concluded, retreating into his sleeping bag once more. I'm not good at stuff like that. Izuku nodded slightly in agreement. Being an angler-type hero, Mr. Aizawa had chosen not to deal with the press too often. Hence, Eraserhead was an apt enough codename to describe his quirk erasure powers. On the other hand, Midnight is famously known to the public as the R-rated hero due to her provocative outfit and somnambulist quirk. She is also fine with handling interviews, and thus the enigmatic yet catchy codename, Midnight, could get the public to recognize her more easily. When you give yourself a name, you get a more concrete image of what you want to be like in the future. Midnight waited patiently as the class distributed the placards. As they say, names and natures do often agree. So come up here and tell me what you see in your future. The class took a moment to scribble down their code names before the first student went up. Shining hero, I cannot stop twinkling, Yuga Aoyama proclaimed proudly, which means, you cannot stop my sparkles. A name fitting for his naval laser quirk, but that's a whole sentence. Aoyama's name was promptly changed to Can't Stop Twinkling by Midnight, and Mina Ashido went up next. More names came and went. Some classmates got theirs on the first try, and others were sent back to their desks to come up with a better one. Todoroki and Tenya had chosen to use their first name, which made Izuku wonder if he should simply do the same, especially since he could not use anything too similar to All Might to avoid suspicion. Paganus, are you still with us? Midnight called out. Come on up, it's your turn. The exchange student walked up to the front and presented his placard to the class without a single word. How do you pronounce that? Felix, Kaminari blurted out. Hang on, isn't that just an alternate spelling of your first name? Oh, I get it. Momo put up her hand like an excited middle school kid. Felix means guardian in Greek, doesn't it? Are you intending for your name to mean protector? A wave of murmuring spread through the class. Some were in awe at Momo's extensive world knowledge, while the others seemed to have been struck by a bout of inspiration. Yes, it's a huge part of an ancient ancient language. Felix nodded. The world is filled with so much injustice and grievances. I wish to be a guardian of the world, to watch over all that is right or wrong, regardless of hero or villain. That got heavy quickly. What an admirable goal. Midnight squeaked energetically. But that name may be a little hard to pronounce. May I suggest for you to use something more recognizable? Felix shrugged and changed the placard on the spot. Sentinel, that's much better, my dear. Midnight smiled warmly, before gesturing for him to return to his seat. You really do have a heavy chip on your shoulders, huh? Izuku watched his friend return to his seat. It might have just been him, but Felix had seemed moodier ever since the sports festival. He wondered if it had something to do with how he lost his final match. He turned his attention back to the simple hero name on his placard as a warm feeling stirred in his chest. He had been blessed to have met so many good friends in Ua High, even though he felt like such a useless doll to them. There was so much he wanted to do for them, to repay them for their unmerited kindness. Midoriya, are you ready? Izuku walked up to the front of the classroom, clutching his placard firmly. In the past, this name was an insult, a mockery of how he resembled a helpless puppet, but a close friend changed the meaning of it, and it made him really happy. It was she who told him that it doesn't have to mean useless. It was she who told him that it can also mean you can do it. I've decided. This is my hero name. His eyes flitted to Ochako for a moment, before displaying the placard to the class. There was a single name on the piece of whiteboard. Deku. The rest of the day passed by like a stray breeze on a cold morning. Tenya opened up his locker to pack up for the day with a dazed expression on his face. There was a certain numbness that came with grief, an anesthesia of some sort, except this drug focused his mind instead of clouding it up and lulling him to sleep. Tenya closed the small door quietly, despite the fact that there were not many students around. After all, everyone was still busy contemplating their internship offers. He, however, had already dropped off his slip in the teacher's office. Mr. Aizawa was understandably surprised at his decision, but he chose not to waste time elaborating further. The boy had but one place he needed to go now. Hosu City. Tenya. He turned around with surprise, before realization dawned on him. Of course he would leave early as well, given that he did not have any internship offers. Hey Paganus, Tenya said, keeping up a warm front. Going home early too. Felix ignored his question, standing uncomfortably close to him with a strange dark expression in his face. A chill ran down Tenya's spine. You chose your internship in Hosu City. You're going to avenge your brother, aren't you? Tenya's expression darkened as well. What's that to you, Paganus? Nothing, so I won't stop you, nor will I tell anyone else. Felix's voice dropped to a barely audible whisper. Seeking revenge for a loved one is something I understand very well, so I'm just here to give you some advice. Tenya's jaw tightened silently. Your quarry operates in dark alleys, no matter the time of the day, Felix said. Beware the hero killer's knife. A single drop of blood is enough to spell your doom. Why are you telling me this? Don't let your emotions cloud your better judgment, my friend. It would be a tragedy to lose you as well. Felix turned around, preparing to take his leave. The hero killer is not yet done in Hosu City, but make haste if you still want to pursue him. He's not one to take his time with his job. The foreign student left as abruptly as he came, leaving Tenya to contemplate his next move. In the bleak midwinter chapter text on most days, Felix took the train home from school. It was a great way to familiarize himself with this world so that he could blend in more easily. But this time, he needed the fresh air to clear his head. He thought it was apt, given that it was the last day of school before what was essentially a week-long vacation for him. His feet carried him along the side pavement on automatic, past the colorful shops and cafes. There were not many people walking along with him, but their appearances were still as diverse as those in the average peak-hour crowd. The people of this world were very much like his own, in terms of supernatural abilities. The only difference was, 80% of the population had a meta ability in this world, whereas it was only 20% for his home world. This world also ran on something called electrical energy, as opposed to arcane magic for Felix's world. Not like he could wield any of that magic directly though. He was part of the unfortunate 20% who were only imbued with rigid supernatural abilities instead. His dull apartment door greeted him loudly, shaking him out of his mindless stroll. Felix pulled the gate testily. It was unlocked, which meant that his roommate was at home for once. Yo, Felix. I didn't expect you to be back so early. I can say the same for you, Jin. Felix grinned at the ash-blonde man. I thought you'd still be out looking for a job. What gives? Bah, you know what it's like out there. Jin rolled his eyes. No one's gonna accept someone with a criminal history like me. I gave up a long time ago. A familiar sight caught Felix's attention. Damn it, Jin. You went stealing again, he said, throwing his school bag on the floor. You won't get away with this forever. One of these days, the constables are going to catch up to you and throw you in jail. Well, I'm sorry for trying to fend for myself. What, you're gonna call me a criminal now like the others? Jin snapped sarcastically. Oh, look out. It's 𝗵𝗃𝗄𝗏, the cloning villain. Spare me your lecture. Not everyone is lucky enough to get a clean slate like you. Felix fell silent in response. Picking up his school bag to unpack his things, Jin chose to sulk by himself beside the array of his stolen goods. The air simmered with tension for a few minutes. Hey, I'm sorry for overreacting. There was a gentle tap on Felix's shoulder. I just thought you'd be happy to see me, man. I am happy to see you. Felix looked at his roommate, who had sat himself down beside him. I'm sorry for being insensitive. I just didn't want to see you get hauled away. You're not getting rid of me that easily, little bro. Jin ruffled his hair affectionately. Besides, I'm sure you'd be able to do something even if that happens. You're a hero in the making after all, right? Your words are sure to hold some weight. You know very well my identity in that school is fake. Felix chuckled dryly. It's only a matter of time before they find out who I am. Jin relaxed his body, leaning back with his hands supporting from behind. You're a good friend, that's who you are. He sighed wistfully. And to think we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for 𝗔𝗫. I guess destiny really has a knack for bringing those who share the same fate together, huh? Yeah. Felix cast his gaze downwards, recalling the circumstances of their meeting. The boy panted, collapsing to the ground. His legs had finally given out, but not because of exhaustion. Felix pounded the soil, sobbing loudly at the betrayal and hopelessness of his situation. He screamed at the heavens, not just for abandoning him to his fate, but also for keeping him alive to witness his own pathetic state. And so he sat by himself at the edge of the cliff, looking at the people pouring out of the derailed train. Discordant lights blinked in the distance, cruelly reminding him of his own world which would never take him back. Hey there, need a buddy to accompany you? A shadow loomed over Felix as a man sat beside him. He was dressed in a white tank top, and a long scar ran along the center of his forehead. Who the hell are you? Felix blurted out rudely. It was nice to see that he had at least fallen into a civilized world. But he was in no mood to be friendly at the moment. Just a lonely man who's hit rock bottom, the man said. And I'm guessing you shared the same fate, friend. How would you know that? Why else would you come here as well? He sighed wistfully. It's a great view to spend your last moments. That's for sure. Felix released a small chuckle, realization dawning on him. Jin, my name is 𝗵𝗃𝗲𝗄. The man broke the silence. What's your name? Why does that matter if you're going to end your life? It'll be nice to know the name of your companion on the road to heaven. The small smile remained on Felix's face. He had no intention of jumping off the cliff to end his life. That wouldn't work anyway, but it was refreshing to talk to someone so open and honest, at least. Felix Paganus, the boy said. I'm not from around here. Does it really matter if we're bound for the same place? We may be playing on different tables, but life has dealt us the same cards. I was exiled. Felix surprised himself with his honesty. For trying to save my family. It didn't matter how much good I had done for society. They didn't care that the man I killed had killed hundreds of people himself. All they saw was a criminal who broke the law. A criminal that has no place with them. We are lonely brothers of fate, you and I, Jin said. People are so quick to condemn another for a single mistake that they would cut them down without hesitation. The roots of our hero society are too ingrained in self-righteousness. And us, the nobodies, we're not even afforded the luxury of comfort when we need it most. The man stood up with a refreshed look on his face. He stretched, letting out a loud sigh of relief. You've won, he shouted to no one in particular. But I have the last laugh. I finally made a friend. I won't die a lonely man anymore. What right do you have to look at me and call me unlucky? Felix closed his eyes. Jin was right. Society had won, and he was nothing but an insignificant cost of its victory. But who were they to condemn him? Who were they to decide if he should live or die? Goodbye, Felix. Jin waved to the boy with a wide smile on his face. I'm glad to have met you. I'll see you on the other side. He leapt off the cliff. Pink flooded Felix's body immediately as he stretched a hand out. His face a picture of willful determination. He lifted his hand, slowly pulling up a struggling Jin back into view. What's happening? The confused man exclaimed. I've made up my mind. I won't admit defeat to society so easily, Felix said as he put Jin back on the ground. So what if society rejects us? We'll just form our own. We may be weak and lonely by ourselves, but together, we will forge a path forward to show them who we are. The boy stretched out his hand to Jin. I could use a friend, 𝗵𝗃𝗲𝗄𝗄. Felix smiled warmly at him. Will you join me? A slow clap interrupted him. The two of them turned around as a bespectacled middle-aged man walked out of the bushes. Well said, boy. My name is 𝗔𝗫, and I think I have a proposal that you'll be interested in. So, may I ask? Jin probed. Why did you accept 𝗔𝗫's offer to work with All for One? Isn't he a reclusive villain? Now that you're a spy in 𝐒𝐻𝐼, you will never truly belong to a family. My family is dead, Felix replied nonchalantly. You're the closest thing I have to a family now. That's all I need. Your country will never know what hit them. Jin smirked, patting him on the back. I saw your performance during the sports festival. Greece made a huge mistake making an enemy out of you. I hope All for One helps you get back at them. A dark look crossed Felix's face. Although 𝗔𝗫 had already given him a crash course about how this world functioned, there was still much he had to learn if he wanted to navigate its shadows without assistance. This world was complex, But its idolatry of heroes was as clear as day, as was its hypocrisy. Beneath the gilded hero society lay nothing more than just another means to trample on the weak and different. It seems the world he was thrust into was not that much different from his. Just like his own society, it was all a mere golden sham. One step at a time, Felix muttered to himself. People fear gods because they fear that which they cannot hope to control. So I'll prove them right. Public Enemy chapter text. The cobalt curtain quickly descended over the city-line, chasing out the fleeing hues of red as twilight rapidly swept over 𝐻𝑒𝐻𝑠u City. Beneath it spanned a long line of tracks extending into the distance, vibrating slightly as a train approached the vibrant discord of neon lights. Izuku leaned against the humming glass, watching the scenery whiz by him. The train ride to Shibuya was a long one, but his internship mentor had apparently meant for that to happen. According to him, it would be more fun to patrol as a hero if there are more skirmishes along the way. The student checked his phone again. I'll be passing near 𝐻𝑒𝐻𝑠u. How are things going with you, 𝐒𝐴? His text message read, although Tenya still had not replied to him. Izuku pursed his lips with concern. It was uncharacteristic of Tenya to ignore messages, considering that he usually responds within 3 minutes of reading them. A muffled crash echoed in the distance. It sounded like some sort of thunder, except hey, look at that. A building just exploded. Commotion erupted in the train carriage as the passengers gesticulated wildly at the smoking building in the distance. Passengers, please stay in your seats, the robotic voice announced in its usual soothing voice. It did nothing to calm the train occupants down. The train doors burst open less than a second later, crumpled by 2 struggling figures. Panicked screams ensued in the carriage as they took in the grotesque sight before them. A hero dressed in a fursuit was grappling frantically with some kind of creature whose brain was exposed. There was no doubt what it was. Namu, Izuku shouted, turning to his mentor instinctively. But the caped elder had already disappeared from his seat. Yellow flashed around him, followed by several sounds of boots splitting flesh. The Namu screeched and let go of its prey as the diminutive old-timer hero knocked it to the floor within seconds. Gran Torino, Izuku called out. Kid, sit down. Gran Torino shouted, leaping out of the way as the creature got back up to its feet. Air burst from the holes in his feet once more as he darted around the carriage at a blinding speed, before pushing the Namu out of the train. Everyone, please return to your seats for now, the train captain announced. The villain is not here anymore. Please wait calmly for the heroes. Izuku made for the hole in the train instead. If this Namu had the same level of power as the one at the USJ, it won't just be Gran Torino, the entire 𝐻𝑒𝐻𝑠u City will be in trouble. And so will 𝐒𝐴, who was interning there. Excuse me, I'm getting out. Green energy crackled around Izuku as he charged one for all throughout his body. It had taken him long enough, but the internship with Gran Torino had taught him how to use his quirk at 5% to prevent damage to his body. The young hero leapt out of the train, rolling along the floor to cushion the impact as he continued running off into 𝐻𝑒𝐻𝑠u City. There was no time for detours now, not when the city was literally burning right in front of him. It was time for the fruits of his training to pay off. One for all, full cowling. Izuku landed on the pavement smoothly, heading into the middle of the commotion. Gran Torino, 𝐒𝐴, everyone, please be okay. A trio watched 𝐻𝑒𝐻𝑠u City burn from the top of a building. The screams of fleeing civilians were barely audible from their vantage point, but the man covered in hands seemed to be delighting in their sounds of distress nonetheless. Was it really necessary to let those monsters loose? Felix asked Shigaraki, who was still obsessively scratching his neck. What did 𝐻𝑒𝐻𝑠u City even do to you? The city looks so much better like this, don't you think? Shigaraki replied, barely bothering to conceal his sadistic pleasure at the city's destruction. Besides, you just missed that annoying hero killer. You should have been there. He's acting so noble I could cry. You can't make fun of him too much, Shigaraki. Kurogiri joined in. The truth is, in all the cities where Stain has appeared, the crime rate has fallen. Even though some critics attributed this to a rise in Hiro's consciousness and still shot him down, the results of his actions speak for themselves. Wow, great. Our hero killer is also a hero breeder, Shigaraki snapped, his voice dripping with sarcasm. This society is overgrown with fake heroes. The word itself has lost its true meaning. And the criminals who wave their power around idly should all be purged. The man gestured mockingly, imitating the hero killer. Whatever. He talks all high and mighty like that, but he's basically just trying to start a grassroots movement. Let me guess. Recruitment drive gone bad. Felix scoffed. Our goals fundamentally oppose each other. It'll never work out. Shigaraki sounded almost like he was sighing. He rambles on and on about conviction and desire, as if he just doesn't want to destroy everything he hates too. Smoky wind rustled Felix's light purple cape as another explosion sent tremors through the building. You think you can get away with stabbing me, Stain? Shigaraki held his bandaged hand tenderly. I'll kill you just because I can. Honor and pride. I'll shred that useless banner you wave in my face. If I may, Director, Felix said with mock respect. Pray tell, why have you summoned me here? I may be on school vacation, but I have my own matters to attend to. Wouldn't it be ironic if the hero killer was killed by a fledgling hero? Shigaraki turned to the boy. I want you to kill him for me, Paganus. Felix rolled his eyes, before narrowing them at the anarchistic villain. Oh, don't give me that look. Don't think I don't know you attacked Stain and saved Ingenium. Even though the doctor's instructions were for you to only observe his quirk, you defied the doctor's orders of your own accord, Shigaraki said. So you clearly detest the hero killer as well, don't you? Well, here's your chance to finish the job. Might I remind you that I'm working with you, not for you? The boy retorted. I'm still a hero in the eyes of 𝗂𝐴. I'm not prematurely blowing my cover for your amusement. That's what my 𝗏𝗔s are for. Shigaraki threw his head back, letting loose a maniacal laugh. What a fun game. Once this night is over, the world will have forgotten about you, hero killer. It'll be my 𝗏𝗔s on the front page. And you won't even be alive to witness your demise. The psychic released a grunt, before leaping off the building and soaring into the concrete jungle. Not that he agreed with the immature villain, but there was a huge part of him that wanted to beat up the hero killer as well. He only hoped that Tenya had not found Stain before he did. Izuku had been running on the streets for no more than 5 minutes when he heard a voice call out a familiar name. The boy turned a corner sharply, just in time to witness an abandoned bus hurtling towards him. He only had time to shield himself, but thankfully, the vehicle exploded into a huge ball of fire before it could hit him. He widened his eyes in horror at the sight before him. Apart from the raging fires along the streets, different variations of 𝗏𝗏s were also attacking civilians indiscriminately, barely being held off by a few pro-heroes. Tenya, the same voice repeated himself, with a lot more urgency this time. Oh man, where did you go? Why'd you choose a time like this to run off by yourself? Manual, put out the fire. All right. The man gestured at the gushing fire hydrant, hydrokinetically directing it towards the flames licking dangerously close to the pavement. The voice from earlier. Manual, the normal hero. That's where Ada went for his internship. Ada's too diligent to run off at a time like this, unless he actually found the hey kid, you're in the way. Another pro-hero stood between Izuku and a rampaging Namo. We'll hold the villains here. Evacuate with everyone else. I'm sorry, Izuku called out, before running off in search of Tenya. His mind worked furiously while he searched the alleyways. Both the hero killer and 𝗏𝗏s had appeared in this city at the same time as Tenya's disappearance. Not only did this imply that Stain and the League of Villains are somehow connected, it also meant that Tenya could have already found the hero killer by himself. An unusual-sounding commotion caught the boy's attention. He turned into yet another deserted alleyway. The voices were getting louder, and there was no mistaking it this time. Say whatever you want. You're just a criminal who hurt my brother. Izuku leapt off the walls, generating more and more momentum. He hurtled towards the red-scarfed villain before he could react. One for all, full cowling. Smash! Shockwave rippled from his fist, sending the villain's body flailing away from the sheer power of his punch. Izuku landed in between Stain and Tenya, green lightning dancing around his body as he got into a combat stance. My Midoriya. Tenya's strangled voice escaped him. I came to save you, Ida. Class 1A versus the Hero Killer Chapter Text Midoriya. Why did Paganus send you to come to my aid? This has nothing to do with Felix. It was talked about on TV. Most of the hero killer's victims were found in places without many people. Izuku replied without taking his eyes off the villain. I searched all the alleyways one by one, especially those further away from the center of the commotion near the normal hero agency. I searched in them until I found you. Can you move? Not since he cut me. Tenya was straining to reply. I think it's his quirk. It's just as the commentators on TV guessed. Izuku muttered grimly. His quirk is somehow activated by cutting people. Izuku's eyes flitted to the other hero lying in the corner. He was dressed in Native American clothes and also seemed paralyzed just like Ida. The boy balled his fists with determination. If Tenya had been the only one injured, he could at least carry him away to safety. But with a second casualty in the area, there was no way he could rescue both of them before the villain caught up to them. He had to face this hero killer here and now, or at least until the pros arrive. Midoriya, don't get involved. This has nothing to do with you. Tenya yelled desperately. Run, save yourself. Your friend came to save you? Ha, you have good friends, if nothing else. Stain pulled out his dagger sinisterly, before shifting his attention to the green-haired hero. But I have a duty to kill this vengeful false hero. The weaker one of us will be killed if we clash, child. So what will you do now, fight or run? Izuku locked eyes with his opponent, secretly sending out a location from his phone behind him. It was just as the news had said. The hero killer was no ordinary villain, unlike the 𝗏𝗏s or the thugs who had attacked the USJ. The look in his eyes was that of a fanatical killer. Stop it. Run away. I told you, didn't I? This has nothing to do with you. I won't abandon you, Ida. Izuku raised his fists at the grinning villain. Like All Might said, meddling when you don't need to is the essence of being a hero. He took the offense, charging directly at Stain. Steel flashed before his eyes as the villain swung his sword at an incredible speed. Izuku bent backwards, sliding on the floor just underneath the blade. 5% Detroit. The boy turned around, throwing a fist at the man's face. Smash! His punch struck its target cleanly, and Izuku landed in front of the hero killer again. A wide smile spread along his face. Full cowling had worked. He could fight now. His body froze, and he collapsed to the ground as though suddenly paralyzed. A trickle of blood leaked from the small graze on his arm. You left my field of vision and maneuvered your way around to bring me down. Impressive, kid. Stain put his spare dagger down from his mouth. Heroes who are all talk are a dime a dozen, but it's clear that you're different from these guys. You are worth letting live. He placed his foot on Tenya. He, however, is the furthest from what a hero should be. Look at him. His eyes are searing with vengeance. Consumed by hatred, he only wants to use his quirk to fulfill his own selfish desires. And that's why he will die. Izuku watched helplessly as the killer raised his blade again, preparing to end Tenya's life for real this time. Goodbye, child. You'll be an offering to a more just world. Stop it. A flash of fire surged through the alleyway, making Stain leap away from his victim yet again. There are a lot of people getting in my way tonight. The hero killer glared at the second intruder, whose left half of his body was doused in fire. Midoriya, you need to give more details in times like this. Todoroki pointed at the location on his phone. It took me a while to figure out what you meant when you sent just your location info. Todoroki, keep your distance. This guy controls his opponent's actions by ingesting their blood orally, Izuku shouted in warning. That's how he got all of us. He sucks blood to keep people from moving. Stain burst forward, only to meet jagged ice from the floor. He swung his blade, slicing the top off in a single swing. Streetlights glinted off metal as the sword flew directly at the ice user. Todoroki flinched, narrowly avoiding the weapon. But the danger was not yet over. A dagger followed up closely, grazing his left cheek. The boy gasped as the figure blocked the moonlight, stretching out his tongue creepily as he flew towards him. Fire burst from his left side in response, making Stain back off again. Feeling returned to Izuku's body as he stood up groggily. For some reason, he had been released from the hero killer's hold, even though he was the last one to be paralyzed. Midoriya, I can move normally now. Izuku panted, groggily raising his fists. Even though Stain got me last, I think his quirk's effectiveness has something to do with blood type. It doesn't matter whether we know how his quirk works, Todoroki said grimly. His reaction is too fast for us to leave ourselves open. We need to take him down first before rescuing the others. I'll distract him, and you'll support me from behind, Izuku said. It's a pretty big risk we have to take, but that's the only way the two of us can protect them. One for all surged through his veins once more as he prepared to lunge at the villain again. Scree. Midoriya, look out. Izuku flipped, kicking off a nearby wall to dodge the huge figure that rudely interrupted them. It screeched in the same grating voice once more, breaking out of Todoroki's jail of ice easily. Anamu found us, Izuku yelled, throwing a punch at the creature. It seized his wrist roughly instead, its unbridled strength threatening to snap it like a twig. A wall of flames burst towards the Namu, and it let go of him. The monster turned its attention to Todoroki, before slamming the boy away in a single backhand. Izuku leapt towards it with a war cry, but only succeeded in getting knocked headfirst towards the ground as well. He crawled on the floor painfully as the Namu stared at him like a bird observing its prey. Reciprocal extend. A gust of wind rippled through the alley. The Namu staggered backwards, reeling in apparent pain from the powerful kick that had pushed it away. Stain's right. I have no right to call myself a hero. Izuku felt a pair of hands lift him back to his feet. But even so, I won't give in. Tenya was gritting his teeth. I refuse to let the name of 𝗵𝗲𝗄𝗏 die in my hands. Movement flashed from behind the monster as Izuku widened his eyes in shock and dismay. The hero killer was taking the chance to escape while they were distracted. He glanced towards his friend. Tenya had definitely noticed that as well, but his eyes were focused on the monster in front of them. I will not forgive you, hero killer. Tenya stood in front of his friends. But I have a duty above all else to protect others in the face of danger. I was an incompetent fool to have forsaken all that for my personal revenge. No more. The Namu screamed again, as if challenging the young heroes. They tensed up in response, bracing themselves for the tough fight ahead. A deafening thud crashed from behind, causing the Namu to turn around. Dust swirled around the small crater as 2 points of pink poked out from the darkness. Wait, isn't he supposed to be overseas now? So, you're the punk who's been terrorizing the streets, huh? Moonlight glanced off the pantaloon mask as Felix slowly stepped into view. For someone who's trying to make a change in society, you're awfully elusive, hero killer. The Namu roared at the psychic, leaping towards him. Psionic thunder. Electricity crackled through the air, striking the writhing monster squarely in its head. Smoke sizzled as its flesh began to burn from the powerful current running through its body. Don't ever interrupt me again. Felix flung his hand casually, sending the 𝗓𝗏𝗄 crashing into the building across the street. He put his hand down as the remnant sparks fizzled out around his arm. Gotta say, it's pretty satisfying yelling out the name of your own moves. The boy smirked as his gaze shifted back to the hero killer. Who are you? Stain pulled out his knife cautiously. Just a guy who's trying to right some wrongs, Felix replied. He had scarcely finished his sentence when the hero killer darted forward, driving his knife towards his abdomen. Felix, Izuku screamed in warning. There was a comical clang as the bent blade bounced off the floor. Everyone's mouth hung open at the durability of Felix's psychic aura. You're nothing but a self-righteous fanatic. Felix pointed at the man, whose entire body was now frozen tightly by pink bindings. Your solution to this world is nothing but violence, a petty tantrum thrown by a toddler who can't get his way. The psychic swung his hand, tossing Stain around like a rag doll before holding him up again. It was evident that Felix was simply toying with his prey. So you think you can get away with hurting someone's brother? The boy suddenly raised his voice. Not so easy when they fight back, huh? A breeze flicked Izuku's hair as the hero killer's body flew past him, crashing onto the floor. Stain spat out a puddle of blood as he struggled to get back to his feet. Felix took his time to walk towards him. This world isn't yours to fix. Felix's voice had dropped to a whisper, but it was still audible to the boy beside him. A chill went down Izuku's spine at how villainous his friend was sounding. Stain slammed onto the ground for the last time, and Felix finally relinquished his hold on his motionless body. Aftermath chapter text. Izuku spent about 3 minutes searching in the trash for something to tie up the knocked-out villain, before settling for some flimsy-looking strings. They looked like they would snap at the slightest struggle, but the worst of their troubles should be over by now. Just tie him up so that it'll be easy to transport him, Felix said lazily, leaning against the wall. If he breaks out, I'll break his legs. I thought you were supposed to be out of the country, Izuku asked Felix. How did you know where to find us? I didn't leave the country. I was just visiting the other prefectures in Japan and happened to be in the area. My father is in the area as well, Todoroki chimed in. We should be prepared to turn the hero killer over soon. There was a soft thud as Tenya suddenly fell to his knees. Alarm danced in Izuku's eyes as he reached out to his friend, fearing that he had somehow collapsed from an injury. I'm sorry. Everyone, Tenya was sobbing. You were injured because of me. I couldn't see anything through my anger. This is all my fault. Izuku tapped his back gently. I'm sorry too, Ida. Even though you were feeling so cornered, I didn't notice at all, he said. Even though we're friends, I wasn't there to support you. Pull yourself together. You're the class rep, right? Todoroki gave him an uncharacteristically warm smile. You did nothing wrong, Tenya. Felix approached him as well. You're a hero. Don't ever forget that. Footsteps turned briskly around the corner, interrupting the moment before it could get any mushier. Gran Torino, Izuku exclaimed, relieved that his mentor was none the worse for wear. The old man was not as pleased. Why you? What are you doing here? Concern and shock creased his wrinkled face even further. I thought I told you to stay on the bullet train. Gran Torino, I'm sorry. Shoto, so this is what you meant when you said that your friends might be in danger. Endeavor walked in behind the elder, keeping his flaming arms folded. I see you've subdued the hero killer before I could. Well done, worthy of praise. We're gonna need an ambulance for a few of us, Felix stated flatly. Already done. There was a request for help. So obviously, I took the liberty of calling one here, Endeavor said in a gruff voice. The police are on their way too. Well, I don't really know what's going on, but I'm glad you kids are okay, Gran Torino said, clearly aware of the rapidly spreading tension between the heroes. Just stay put until lookout. Screeching flew above them as the 𝗓𝗏𝗄 swooped overhead, attempting to seize the heroes. It turned sharply and dived towards them again. Flames exploded from Endeavor's body as he stretched a hand out, preparing to incinerate the monster for good. The creature froze mid-flight, trembling slightly as a pink aura held it together. Sickening cracks were heard as every limb and appendage on its body snapped off at their joints. Bones jutted out at awkward angles, before being crushed into fine dust as the invisible force compressed its grotesque body. Felix flicked his hand casually, as if throwing a crumpled ball of waste paper. The clump of flesh plopped onto the floor anticlimactically. Damn, I should really learn to finish the job more thoroughly, he muttered. A primal roar shattered the air. It was raw, almost inhuman sounding even. You fakes, I must make things right. Stain had broken free of his bindings and was yelling at the heroes in front of him, as if challenging them to a fight. I will reclaim what it means to be a hero. This world must be cleansed with blood. The heroes did not move a muscle, as though paralyzed with fear by the man's sheer intimidating aura. Come, try and get me, you fakes. The only one I'll let kill me is the true hero, All Might. Stain stopped abruptly, the pearly whites of his eyes showing as he froze in his position. Izuku glanced at Felix to see if he was the one who telekinetically knocked out the man, but the boy only shook his head slightly. And for that moment, the only one who was ready to fight his opponent to the death was the hero killer. It wasn't until a day later when it was revealed that a broken rib had punctured Stain's lung in his exertion. The hero killer, though brought low by fledgling heroes, was the one who dealt the finishing blow on himself. For better or worse, he was miraculously still alive after all that, and was locked up in the Supermax prison, Tartarus. The young heroes, with the exception of Felix, spent the next few days recuperating in Hasu General Hospital. Tenya had suffered the worst injuries out of the three. His left hand was the most damaged, although the injury really only affected his finger dexterity in the future. Despite only suffering mostly superficial wounds, the police were adamant that they be kept in their rooms for now. "Oh, are you wounded kids awake?" Gran Torino slid the hospital door open. Felix followed the old man in, accompanied by Manuel and a policeman with a dog's head on his shoulders. "Gran Torino, Felix?" Izuku exclaimed energetically. "Manuel," Tenya mumbled, keeping his head low. "Kid, I've got a lot of complaints for you." Gran Torino shook his head. "But first, this is Hasu's chief of police, Kenji Tsuragami." The students struggled to get out of their beds to stand, but the dog man motioned them to remain in their beds. Felix walked over as well, standing among his fellow classmates. "You must be the students who brought down the hero killer, right?" The police chief began, and the kids nodded their heads in affirmation. "Since you are US students, I assume you already know this." When superpowers were still becoming the norm, the police attached high importance to leadership and standards. He began. This was all done to make sure quirks were not used as weapons. Felix folded his arms. After that, the profession of hero emerged to fill that gap. Thanks to the early heroes who followed the ethics and rules of the profession, the use of such lethal force and power, actions that normally would be appropriate to denounce, was finally accepted officially by the public. Tenya looked away in regret. However, it is a clear violation of the rules for uncertified individuals to cause injury with their quirks without specific instruction from their guardians or supervisors. Even if you're up against someone like the hero killer, Chief Tsuragami said grimly. As such, the three of you as well as the pro-heroes Endeavor, Manuel, and Gran Torino must receive strict punishment. Both Izuku and Todoroki looked up in shock. Hold up. If Ada hadn't done anything, Native would have been killed. If Midoriya hadn't arrived on time, the two of them would have died. Indignation was written all over Todoroki's face. None of you even realized that the hero killer had reappeared. Are you saying we should just follow the rules and watch people get hurt? That is why you're not a full-fledged hero yet. The policeman shook his head in disappointment. It's clear that you and Endeavor have taught you nothing. Anger flared in Todoroki's eyes. Fire probably would have too, if he wasn't concerned about being arrested for assaulting a police officer. You son of a bitch. He stormed up to the man, while Izuku frantically tried to pull him back. The chief stood his ground, unfazed by the raging boy. "So are you saying that as long as it turns out all right, it's okay to bend the rules?" "Yes," Felix almost shouted, and the walls trembled slightly. "What have your damned rules gotten you so far?" "Nothing but more chances for people to slip through society's cracks. It's because of these kinds of rules that the wicked go unpunished, while the just get stifled by bureaucracy." The boy marched up to the police chief. "You law enforcers are nothing but foolish cowards. You're afraid of what we can do. Hell, you fear your own powers. Restricting the use of meta abilities will only blow up in your faces in the future. I came here to visit my friends, not watch them get lectured for doing the right thing." The room was deathly silent now. Now, don't be rash, young one." Gran Torino raised a placating hand. "You might want to hear him out until the end. What I've said so far is just the official opinion of the police to the public," Chief Tsuragami continued, ignoring the student's outburst. "Any punishment would only be dealt if this was leaked to the public. But truth be told, you would probably be applauded by them instead for doing the right thing. So as far as they are concerned, Endeavor was the one who saved the day. After all, the evidence fits nicely, so no one will know the truth of what happened." Izuku muttered. "For better or for worse, that's up to you to decide." The chief nodded. "Personally, I don't want to crush you promising young heroes just because of one mistake. It's unfair. You won't be able to receive public praise for your heroic actions. But as a law enforcer myself, and from the bottom of my heart, I wish to say thank you." The man bowed deeply at the students, and the room collectively relaxed. You could have started with that." Todoroki mumbled in slight embarrassment. Tenya walked to his supervisor and bowed his head. "I am truly sorry for all the trouble I caused you." "Yeah, you did." Manuel chuckled and smacked his intern on the head lightly. "Don't do it again, all right?" "I won't." The doors closed behind the adults shortly after, leaving the students alone. Izuku approached Felix slowly, who was silently staring out of the window. "Hey, Felix, are you all right?" he began hesitantly. "I haven't gotten the chance to say this, but thank you for saving us back at the alley." The boy released a muffled grunt of acknowledgement, still keeping his back turned to his friends. I know I've said this before, but I'm glad to be friends with such a strong person like you, Tenya added. You really are on a different level from the rest of us. It was because of you that I've learned to embrace my fire quirk again, Todoroki said. You lifted my emotional baggage off of me, and that's something I won't forget. I know the look of someone with a huge chip on your shoulders. If there's anything we can do to help, you just need to ask. Izuku suppressed his surprise at Todoroki's straightforwardness. Although the quiet student had not interacted that much with Felix, it looked like even he had picked up on his classmate's darkness. Felix's beatdown of Stain also seemed very much personal, as if the villain had brought back some kind of unpleasant memory in him. I'm fine. Felix smiled at them after a long pause. Sorry about overreacting just now. I'm just mad at the system. They don't care about doing the right thing. They'd rather silence us to preserve the peace. The boy's voice trailed away as his fists clenched audibly. I'm glad that you're all okay. See you when school starts. The League of Villains chapter text. It was just after 9 in the evening when Felix rolled up to a shady-looking bar. Night had fallen hard on this part of the town, and the shadows did not make the deserted alleyway look any better. Still, this was going to be his headquarters, at least for his remaining days in this world. The doors opened slightly, and Felix was immediately greeted by a loud table slam. Damn it, that hero killer is all everyone's talking about, Shigaraki complained, shaking a newspaper. What about my 𝗵𝗲? We didn't even make it to the front page. Felix strolled up to the fuming man. Think on the bright side. The public thinks that Stain is connected to us. With his ideals infecting Japan like a raging pandemic, we've already attracted a lot of people to our cause. There's no need to fixate on the 𝗵𝗲. Shigaraki swung around violently as the cup in his hands crumbled to dust. His shoes creaked against the wooden floorboard, and he marched up to the boy. Whose side are you really on, Paganus? He growled. I told you to kill Stain, and you just let him get arrested. You even killed one of my 𝗵𝗲s. Why should I keep you here if you're just going to disobey and go against me? Throwing a tantrum just because something didn't go your way. Really? Felix rolled his eyes. I'm on my own side. I told you before, my main goal is to return to my home and destroy it for banishing me. Stop lying to me, Felix Paganus. You're not from Greece at all. The man jabbed a finger at him. I've verified your documents. They're all fake. I don't know where you're from. I don't even know if you're using your real name. Why does it matter? Because I said so. Shigaraki seized his wrist roughly as Kurogiri called out in alarm. You better tell me everything right now. Felix scoffed arrogantly. My mind is already on your cerebral artery. Do you really think you can be faster than me? I just need one touch to kill you, and I don't need to touch you to kill you. A static buzz interrupted them before either side could carry out their threats. The television came to life, and All for One finally showed himself on the screen this time. Let him go, 𝗵𝗲. It was my idea to conceal his true identity. Master, Shigaraki released his grip reluctantly, turning to the screen in both disbelief and confusion. Felix folded his arms impatiently. All for One, I have done what you've asked of me, even the waiting part. I need some sincerity on your end if you want my continued cooperation. It's as if you read my mind. The fully masked man flashed a bottle containing a wispy purple substance. Felix widened his eyes in recognition. It was 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏, the very same magic substance that fueled his home world and gave him his psi powers. Dr. Yujiko's researchers have done a fantastic job at reverse engineering the gate that brought you here, All for One said. Your world's energy is most fascinating, but tricky to harness. Your path home is already halfway complete, Felix. After all, I'm not one to go back on my word. His world, Shigaraki muttered. It may be best to share some personal details with your closest allies. Felix took a deep breath. He did not like the idea of recounting his painful exile, but if it meant strengthening the trust of his temporary allies, he did not exactly have a choice in this matter. Fine, it's true, I am not of this world, he said behind gritted teeth. In my world, magic reigns superior, while metahumans like me are trampled upon. Despite our circumstances, some metahumans still choose to hurt their own kind. My sister was killed by one of them. The boy swallowed hard. Her murderer was a mafia boss, so it wasn't difficult to track him down as a law enforcer myself. Killing him was a little tougher, but I got the job done anyway. But the government had deemed me too dangerous to keep alive, so they tried to banish me into oblivion. He scoffed again, although pain gurgled in his voice, as if I would go quietly after being betrayed like that. So I fought back and broke the gate in the process. The next thing I knew, I was already in your world. Like I've told you, my desire is simple. Revenge is all I seek, but I have no way back by myself. A swollen pause hung in the air, before Shigaraki broke it with an exaggerated exhale of exasperation. Are you serious, Master? He shook his head. Magic. Other worlds. I'm surprised you believed such a ridiculous tale. What do you think this is, some kind of video game? Felix's story may sound fake to you, but the hatred in his heart is very real, All for One replied calmly. Besides, there is no need to know his past when the present is right in front of you. Felix's incredible power is what makes him a formidable weapon. You just need to know how to wield it. Static buzzed from the television once more as the screen returned to its default pitch black. Felix's mind swirled. There was no doubt that All for One was only interested in making use of him to further his own goals, since he wasn't even bothering to hide it. But that man was the only one resourceful enough to rely on at the moment. Compromising as his position was, Felix was already knee-deep in this situation. There was nothing else he could do but to keep moving forward towards his goal. The doors opened again with a slight creak, and another familiar voice greeted them. You've been busy, Shigaraki. Jiren sauntered in, accompanied by two unfamiliar faces. The League of Villains have been the talk of the town for these past few days. Rumors have it that you're planning something big. It's been a while, Jiren. Felix grinned at the bespectacled broker. Good to see you adapting so well to your foreign circumstances, boy. How's 𝗵𝗃𝗲 doing? Who are they? Shigaraki cut in before Felix could strike up a conversation. The tall, slim man stepped forward first. Spiky black hair hung over his heavily lidded, turquoise eyes, while patches of gnarled, burnt skin littered the lower half of his face. His lips curved up into a terrifying-looking grin as his flesh weighted around the crude-looking surgical staples holding his face together. So it's you, huh? The man's voice was as dry-sounding as his skin looked. I saw a picture of you once, but you look way grosser in person. Wow, it's the hand guy. You're friends with Mr. Staney, right? Let me join the League of Villains too. The girl beside him chirped, her ash-blonde hair waving slightly in her excitement. A crazed look danced in her slit-like yellow irises, while a slight blush decorated her fair-skinned cheeks. Her smile was also a little too wide for comfort, especially with her exceptionally long canines that gave her a vampiric appearance. Kurogiri, get rid of these guys. Shigaraki waved his hand impatiently. Everything I hate came together in one set. A psychotic brat. And a man with no manners. Jiren's a notorious broker. They're bound to be valuable assets, Kurogiri said. They came all this way. We should at least hear them out. I don't really care what you do to them, as long as I get my commission. But you can't deny the quality of my catches, Jiren added. After all, I brought you Paganus here, didn't I? At least let me introduce these ones too. He motioned to the girl. First, this cute-looking high school girl. Her name and face were kept tightly under wraps by the media, but she's the primary suspect in a series of blood-related murders. I'm Toga, Himiko Toga. Life's too hard. I just want the world to become an easier place to live in. The glint in her eyes was getting more deranged with every word. I want to become Mr. Staney. I want to kill Mr. Staney. Great, a psycho in my group. Felix groaned internally. Next, this guy over here. Nothing too flashy yet, but he's a huge believer of Stain's ideology. The burnt man folded his scarred arms. Does your organization really have a just cause? Don't tell me you're letting this crazy girl in as well. I'm beginning to doubt my decision already. At least she was able to hold a conversation, Shigaraki snapped. You can't even introduce yourself. I go by 𝗬𝗲𝗄. What's your real name? You'll know when the time is ripe. 𝗬𝗲𝗄 shook his head. I will carry out the will of the hero killer. That's not what I asked close to the vest. I can respect that. Felix gave him a firm nod. I've got a few secrets of my own too. The sound of wood crashing made him turn around. Shigaraki was storming up towards the two new recruits, anger possessing his gaze. Stain. All I hear is that scumbag's name. Trash. You're all trash. The man darted forward without warning. Reaching for the two new recruits, metal glinted. Blue flames exploded. Purple gas swirled. Pink flared. Seriously, where do you think you are? A playground. Felix's eyes regained their regular color as he let go of everyone in the room. There was a soft sizzling as 𝗬𝗲𝗄 extinguished the flames on his hand. Toga also kept her knife cautiously. Although cruel sadism had already replaced the madness in her eyes, gas swirled around the fuming Shigaraki. We must increase the organization's numbers, if you want what you wish to come true, Kurogiri muttered in his ear. We should be receiving them, not rejecting them. We're in the spotlight now. It would be wise to expand our network. What we need is more manpower. And what I need is a goddamn break. The leader calmed down and headed for the door instead. Felix folded his arms, shaking his head in exasperation. The door slammed shut. So scary. I thought he was actually going to kill us. Toga's voice somehow retained its cheerful tone despite the harrowing experience. He makes me sick, 𝗬𝗲𝗄 mumbled. It's not good practice to complain about a client, but he is far too immature for this, Jiren commented as well. It's a good thing you stopped him before anything bad happened, Felix. So your name's Felix. Toga turned her attention to the boy. You joined before us, didn't you? Hello, senpai. Felix stared at her blankly. What's a senpai? Would it be all right to give you an answer at a later date? I believe Shigaraki knows what he should do, Kurogiri said. He's been humbled twice already, by both All Might and the hero killer. I'm sure he will reach an answer that both you and himself will be satisfied with. Felix followed the two recruits out of the bar. 𝗔𝗂𝗧𝗏, a word. The broker turned back at the swirling gas. About this, Felix 𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗏, although he has pledged allegiance to our cause, he still seems a little untrustworthy as an ally. To put it simply, he's a loose cannon. I'm not too sure if the League of Villains should continue working with him. Pardon me, but if I recall correctly, I only recommended 𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗏 to work with All-for-One and Dr. Yujiko directly. It wasn't my decision that he be involved in your operations, 𝗔𝗂𝗧𝗏 said. But frankly speaking, I believe you should keep him on your side. It is true that he is very powerful, Kurogiri said, deep in thought. He stopped a whole train from crashing, and with considerable ease, might I add. If that isn't enough for you, I'm sure you've watched his performance in the sports festival. If you asked me, I'm willing to bet my life savings that his power is on par with All Might, if not even stronger. Kurogiri fell silent in response. But what's a good broker without a warranty for his products? 𝗔𝗂𝗧𝗏 laughed, preparing to step out of the door. I'm always open to feedback. Worry not, my loyal customer. I have just the thing to keep Felix in line. The door closed behind him. Exposed chapter text. Aizawa put down his phone, holding his head as if to physically contain the churning turbulence rampaging through his thoughts. The news itself was not all that surprising. He was already harboring suspicions, after all. But it was the multitude of questions that rose from its implications which plagued his already disturbed mind. 𝗵𝗃𝗏 doesn't exist in the first place. Pancration doesn't know him at all. He muttered to himself. So where did he come from? Why is he here? The man creased his eyebrows, recalling the faint pink glow in the principal's eyes. Now that he thought about it, it was impossible for Nezu to be careless enough not to verify 𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗏's identity in the first place. And that meant that 𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗏 was somehow clever enough to fake his documents and trick him. Or, oh my god. Aizawa flipped back to the open tab on his computer, staring at the article about psi powers. There were a multitude of supernatural abilities relating to psychic powers, including telekinesis, elemental manipulation, psionic constructs, and atmakinesis. He did not have time to thoroughly study all of them, but one stood out the most: telepathy, mind control. The breakthrough flooded his entire body, re-energizing him as though flipping on all the light switches in his brain in rapid succession. Bakugo's sudden amnesia, Principal Nezu's uncharacteristic sloppiness. It would all make sense if 𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗏 also possessed an undeclared telepathic power as well. Aizawa immediately reached for his phone, but resisted the urge to call the Hero Public Safety Commission. No, he was not being rational now, unless he had any solid evidence that proved that Felix was a criminal. The HPSC would never entertain his mere speculations. Besides, there was no guarantee that Felix hadn't already brainwashed some of the committee members as well. He was alone for this. His phone buzzed, as if on cue with his thoughts. Aizawa raised an eyebrow at the unexpected caller and picked up the phone. Aizawa, are you free? All Might's voice was unusually serious. Night-Eye and I have to meet you. It's regarding young 𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗏, one of your students. The teacher packed his things quickly. The curtains were already drawn shut when Aizawa entered the room. It was no surprise, since All Might was not in his muscle form this time. Detective 𝗬𝗏𝗁 locked the door behind the entering teacher, before walking over to sit on the sofa as well. Aizawa, I hope you'll stay calm after hearing about what we've just found out, Sir Night-Eye began, while All Might continued frowning at the ground. Is this your first day meeting me? Aizawa replied coolly. You know my style. All right, I'll cut to the chase then. The bespectacled hero pulled out a photograph from his breast pocket. You have heard of 𝗔𝗂𝗧𝗏, yes. The notorious broker who collects criminals for the League of Villains, Aizawa affirmed. Guess who we found with him? The teacher squinted at the photograph. The traffic camera's quality was terrible, but there was no way he wouldn't recognize his own student. He wasn't particularly surprised, to say the least, but there was no denying how much his heart sank at seeing Felix's involvement with villains with his own eyes. You're awfully collected, even for someone like you, 𝗬𝗏𝗁 said. Have you already been suspecting your student for a while? I just found out all his documents are faked, Aizawa admitted. We can't call him a villain just yet, but we also have no idea where he is from. All Might sighed loudly. He's not a villain, he can't be. He shook his head. I've been fighting villains for decades. I know a villain when I see one. Young 𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗏 is just a kid. There must be a good explanation to this. Tashinori. Sir Night-Eye's voice sharpened itself quickly. I know you have a hero's heart, and you see the best in everyone. But all of this is just too much of a coincidence. Remember what 𝗬𝗏𝗁 said. The Nomas are genetically engineered with multiple quirks, which is something All-for-One can do. If what he speculates is right, that supervillain could already be back. We're not accusing 𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗏 of being affiliated with villains. But we need to keep our guard up, 𝗬𝗏𝗁 added. You, of all people, should know that sending a spy into 𝗬𝗏 is definitely something All-for-One would do. And not to mention what I saw in your future enough. The room went silent at All Might's outburst. Damn it, he muttered, picking up the photograph. Why would he be involved with someone like him? When was this taken? Aizawa asked, studying the photo as well. Felix was entering Jiren's car, accompanied by another unknown man. If his suspicions were right, records indicate that this was taken about an hour after the Musutafu train accident. Aizawa slumped back on his seat. Everything had just fallen into place. If his deductions were correct, Felix's documents were faked by the resourceful Jiren. Since he was not actually a recommendation student, he did not take the recommendation exams in the first place. If Felix truly was the missing extraterrestrial, the timing couldn't be more perfect now. So, what's the plan? All Might finally spoke up. Are we going to Nezu? Or are you going to expel him? No, not yet, Aizawa said after a long pause. We still don't know if he's connected with the League of Villains yet, nor do we know his purpose of entering Yuha High. We have to be rational about this. We can't make hasty decisions that will only alert the enemy. Indeed, we have to be rational about this. All Might gave him a firm nod, his voice soaked with relief. Let's talk to him about this. I trust you know what you are doing. Tsukachi stood up, preparing to make his leave. Villains all over Japan are beginning to stir up. We would be fools to allow them to tear us from the inside. Felix isn't causing any trouble for now, so I say we let him be until at least the midterms are over. Aizawa glanced at All Might. We may be heroes, but we're still his teachers. He pushed the photograph back to Sir Night-Eye. 2 weeks had passed since school resumed. A week since All Might pulled Izuku aside to tell him about the origins of his quirk as well as its relation to All for One. Unlike the stockpiling quirk that was one for All for One was the ability to steal quirks and pass them around like presents. In addition, All for One himself had been around for about 200 years by now, which meant that he had plenty of time to expand his quirk collection. Although he was rapidly developing moves with his new full cowling, Izuku was still dismayed by the fact that his mentor might not be by his side to combat the growing threat that was All for One. Powerful as One for All was, its holder's duty to combat this great evil was more than daunting to the 15-year-old fledgling hero. But he could not afford to rush for now. The training Yuha High provided was adequate, especially since it was All Might's alma mater as well. All he could do now is to get stronger on his own and trust in his school. The school bell rang as movement erupted around the musing boy. All right, let us hold a study session at my house. Momo piped as the class erupted in cheer. Painful though his studying was, everyone was motivated to pass their final exams, especially when only those who passed could attend the upcoming training camp. Izuku gently tapped the sleeping Felix. Hey Felix, aren't you interested in the study session? He asked, choosing his words carefully. You didn't do too well in the midterms, did you? I mean, well, you placed last, the boy shrugged, rubbing his eyes sleepily as he got out of his seat to head to the cafeteria. Nah, it's fine. It's too difficult. I'll fail no matter how hard I try. The class settled down on the seats in the cafeteria, spiritedly speculating what was going to happen for the practical component of the final exams. Some thought it was going to have something to do with rescue missions, while others were hoping for it to be combat-related. Felix, however, only seemed interested in his lunch, in addition to studying. We'll have to keep ourselves in good physical condition. Oh, sorry. Your head was so big that I accidentally hit it. A golden-haired boy interrupted Izuku's muttering. The green-haired boy rubbed his head tenderly, cringing in pain. That hit definitely did not feel unintentional. Now who the hell are you? Felix had finally chosen to look up from his food, and was glaring at the uninvited student. You're Monoma from Class 1B, right? Izuku answered for the boy, cracking a pained smile at him. I heard you guys met the hero killer. Looks like Classa just loves to have all the attention to yourselves, just like at the sports festival? Huh. Monoma gave them a malicious grin. I hope you realize that all that attention isn't because people have high hopes for you. It's because you keep attracting trouble. What's his problem? Izuku's expression darkened as Tenya shifted uncomfortably beside him. He would have told the obnoxious student off if he hadn't already promised the police chief not to reveal their involvement in the hero killer's capture. Mind your own business, Felix said behind gritted teeth. You speak of matters you know nothing of. Oh, how scary. Someday, the rest of us might also be caught up in the trouble you bring and become victims as well. Monoma put the back of his hand on his forehead dramatically. How unlucky we are. It's like being cursed by the god of pestilence. His face turned purple without warning, and he began clawing at his throat frantically. Wanna rethink what you just said, you little brat? Felix's glowing eyes were focused on the boy. Izuku gasped in shock. Hey, what do you think you're doing? That's enough, Felix. Let him go. Class 1A immediately reached for their classmate, but were repelled by a force field. The fuming boy stood up, tightening his telekinetic grip as he walked menacingly towards Monoma. Felix Paganus. Felix let go of his victim, turning his attention to the teacher who had barked his full name from across the cafeteria. There was an undignified plop as Monoma dropped to the ground, wheezing and coughing violently. The class shrunk away in slight fear, making way for their homeroom teacher. Aizawa was accompanied by 𝐼𝐺𝐸 as well, although an uncharacteristically stern look was plastered on both of their faces. "Get him to the nurse's office," Aizawa ordered, and a few students picked up their classmate. "Don't worry, it's fine now," 𝐼𝐺𝐸 said, despite the fierce glint in his eyes. "Paganus, staff room. Now." Aizawa shoved his student forward as Class 1A went deathly silent. "Heroes never win" chapter text. Felix scooted over to an empty chair, pretending not to notice the sound of the staff room door getting locked behind him. A bespectacled man in a gaudy office attire was sitting cross-legged across him, while a human-looking policeman stood by his side. Whatever this was all about, it was clearly premeditated. All right. Let me guess, detention?" The boy feigned ignorance. "Or community service. I didn't really hurt that boy, did I?" The two men opposite him remained silent, so he turned to his homeroom teacher boldly. "Enough games, kid." Aizawa slapped a student file onto the short table in front of him. "Who are you, really? What is your mission in this school?" Felix's heart skipped a beat, but he covered it up with a wry smile. "This some kind of interrogation roleplay or something? 𝐒𝐽 really has interesting teaching methods." "Stop it, young Paganus. If that's even your real name." 𝐼𝐺𝐸 cut in. "𝐺𝐸𝐵 doesn't exist in Greece. Your recommender, 𝗵𝘃𝗀, has also denied knowing you. It would be in your best interests to tell us the truth so that we can help you. Is someone threatening you?" "I don't know if you're aware of a pro-hero called Ragdoll," the office man said. "Her quirk is Search, which reveals information about an individual. She was instructed to use her quirk on you but has failed to reveal any results, not even an existence of a quirk, and yet you demonstrate meta abilities." He slammed the table without warning, causing everyone to jump. "What are you?" he barked. "Night-Eye." 𝐼𝐺𝐸 called out in shock. "Stand down, he's just a kid." "With all due respect, 𝐼𝐺𝐸." The policeman folded his arms. "You can't even be 100% sure if that is true as well." Felix chuckled darkly. "I really gotta hand it to you heroes. You're good." He leaned back and affected a small smile. Although his cover was fully blown by now, he was feeling strangely relieved for some reason. "No point trying to hide it anymore then," the boy said. "Believe it or not, I am not of this world. A few months ago, I was exiled from my world into yours because my abilities were deemed too powerful to contain. I survived the trip, although I had nowhere else to go." He paused as his eyes stared into the air for a brief moment. 𝐒𝐽 was nearby, and I was drawn in by how welcoming the heroes are. I just want a place where I can be accepted for who I am, so I figured out a way to enter your school. It's a pity that my time in this place has come to an end so quickly." Everyone's eyes were as wide as saucers by now. "I wasn't expecting that," 𝐼𝐺𝐸 said, his demeanor softening even further. "And yet the timing adds up perfectly." Aizawa mused out loud. "I don't think he's making it up. We're the only ones who know about the extraterrestrial gate." Felix flicked his head to his homeroom teacher in shock. "Wait, you guys already found out about the portal?" "Not hard. It made such a mess and drew so much attention. In fact, we had to keep the public from finding out," the policeman said. "To think the extraterrestrial wasn't from another planet, but from another world." Night-Eye adjusted his glasses thoughtfully. 𝐼𝐺𝐸 placed a surprisingly gentle hand on Felix's shoulder, despite how big his palm was. "So you met Jern right after that, and he gave you a way to enter this school. Has he asked you for anything else?" Felix's mind worked furiously. It was clear that his teachers really wanted to trust him, which meant that his cover was not actually completely blown. However, they were somehow aware of his involvement with the notorious Jern as well, and he wasn't sure how much they knew for now. "No, not yet, at least." The boy decided to continue lying, hoping that it wouldn't be seen through too easily. "He just gave me my documents and sent me on my way." Knowing him, that won't be the end you'll hear of that guy. Night-Eye's voice was still sharp, but the glare in his eyes had already softened considerably. "In case you didn't know, he has strong ties with the League of Villains." Felix feigned surprise. "If he finds you again or tries to rope you into any of his business, let us know immediately," Aizawa said. "Detective 𝗧𝗵𝗲 here will take care of the investigative process." The policeman nodded and passed a name card to Felix. "I believe Felix should be allowed to remain in this school for now, Aizawa." 𝐼𝐺𝐸 turned to his colleague. "I'll get in contact with the authorities on our side to see if we can at least give this boy a proper identity." "Paganus, I know you are wary of people who fear your powers, so I will refrain from behaving like them," Aizawa said. "But I hope you realize that this will cause an unnecessary uproar if the others found out about your origins. So whatever happens in this room stays in this room." The boy nodded as the adults prepared to take their leave. "Mr. Aizawa, 𝐼𝐺𝐸." The teachers turned back at their student. "Thank you for giving me a chance in this place." Evening fell, and Felix found himself on the way to the League of Villains hideout again. As promised to his teachers, he simply told his classmates that he was given detention for his unruly behavior. With the exception of those closer to him, the rest of his classmates believed him without question. Fortunately, Aizawa was present to quell any further doubts about his punishment. Muffled noise drifted to his ears as he approached the inconspicuously decorated bar door. A slight twinge of pain stung his conscience for abusing his teacher's trust, but it was already too late to falter here. Surprise, Felix. Felix stepped back in shock at the sight before him. Jin, what are you doing here? He gasped. His roommate was clad completely in a black and gray bodysuit along with gray boots, and was holding a similarly colored mask in his gloved hands. Watching Stain has really inspired me to take a stand in life, and Jiren invited me to join your League of Villains. Jin punched his arm lightly. You didn't tell me you were involved with such an eclectic crew. Felix shifted his attention to the group of people in front of him. Shigaraki had been busy, that was for sure. Apart from Jin, 𝗬𝗲𝗺, and Toga, there were 3 more individuals in the bar as well. One was practically an overgrown lizard, another looked like an average thug, while the last one looked ready to perform his 7 o'clock magic show. What's wrong, Felix? Kurogiri asked. You look disturbed. Is there something wrong with having a friend in the same organization that you're in? Felix opened his mouth pointlessly, still at a loss for words. All right, stop screwing around. Shigaraki got up from the bar stool impatiently. Focus up, now that we're all here. Introductions, and make it quick. Name, quirk, and anything else we should care about. Toga, you first. The girl waved enthusiastically at her new teammates. I'm Toga. Himiko Toga, she piped. I drink people's blood to transform into them. The more I drink, the longer I can stay in their form. I'm also pretty good with knives. Oh, and did I mention this already? I really love blood. 𝗬𝗧𝗏. That's it. I burn down anything I don't like. The scarred man lit blue flames on his arm to prove his point. Jin 𝗵𝗃𝗏. You can call me twice. Jin flashed a toothy grin. I can create an exact duplicate of anyone, provided I know their precise measurements and characteristics. He swung his arm around Felix. So I can create clones of my buddy and I with no problem for now. But if you want me to clone you, just give me some time to get your measurements. 𝗬𝗧𝗏𝗏, 𝗬𝗏𝗏, or spinner. The lizard man leaned coolly against the wall. My quirk is obvious. Stain is my idol. I look forward to accomplishing his vision with you. Sato Atsuhiro, or better known as... The stage magician paused dramatically, as though anyone in the room actually cared about his villain name. Mr. Compress, touch my hand and risk getting shrunk into a marble. He cackled wildly, oblivious to the indifferent faces in front of him. I'm also a master escape artist. Do you like magic? You won't when I've bested all your contraptions. I'm 𝗳𝗏𝗄𝐴. You can call me Muscular, the thug with a prosthetic eye said in a gruff voice. I'll be frank with you. You're all small fries compared to me, so get out of my way when I'm doing my thing. I'm strong and I'm just here to kill. I don't care who else gets hurt. He kinda sounds like Bakugo. Another cocky one, eh? Felix Paganus. If we're using code names, I'll go with Sentinel, Felix said as Jin clapped enthusiastically. Mind over matter, that's my power. No drawbacks, no limits, no rules. Hold on, aren't you a US student? I've seen your face on TV. Muscular jabbed an accusatory finger at the boy. What's a child from a hero school doing here? In exchange for revenge against his country, Felix has agreed to work with us as a US spy, Kurogiri replied. In fact, his information is why we have gathered all of you here. So, you desire revenge as well. 𝗬𝗏𝗏 approached the boy. I can already tell we're going to get along. Shigaraki shoved them apart rudely, standing in the middle of the sizable group. First things first. From now on, you will be part of the Vanguard Action Squad. There'll be a few extra members, but that's a problem not for you to worry about. What you should be concerned with is the infiltration of the upcoming UA training camp. Felix raised an eyebrow at his leader's decision. He wasn't expecting the League of Villains to make such a bold move so quickly, especially not on a camp teeming with pro heroes. The location and date will be provided by Paganus after UAS final exams. The villain continued, turning his attention to Felix. So you better pass that thing and get your teachers off your back. The student nodded grimly. Shigaraki flashed 2 photographs. These will be our targets. Izuku Midoriya and Katsuki Bakugo. Bakugo. Why Bakugo? Felix blurted out. In a society of rules, villains are not the only ones being oppressed. Shigaraki paced back to his seat. Modern heroes are so uptight. No matter what they do, they'll always be on the losing end. Katsuki Bakugo loves to win. That boy has the makings of a villain. He just doesn't know it yet. Might I remind you what happened the last time you tried to forcefully recruit someone? Felix folded his arms. It'll be different this time. I've thought it through. As for Izuku Midoriya, we intend to inflict enough trauma on his mind and body to hasten the final crystallization of his quirk. Waiting any longer will do us no good. It's better to make our own opening and ripen his quirk for the taking. The expression on Felix's face was as blank as everyone else in the room. Not like he really understood how quirks functioned. But if that was an option from the beginning, why wait until now to perform the kidnapping? Shigaraki seemed to have read the confusion on his face. because he passed a tape recorder to him and leaned closer to his ear. "I really wasn't expecting your story to be true after all," he whispered. "You'll have a big part to play in crystallizing Midoriya's quirk. Once that's done, you can go home." Felix received the recorder, worry and confusion written all over his face. "Final exams chapter text, you're all gathered here for your practical exam. Remember, it's possible to fail this final, so don't make any stupid mistakes if you want to go for the training camp." Izuku stared at the lineup of UA teachers in front of his classmates. According to Class 1B and his seniors, the practical exam was most likely going to be the robots like in the entrance exam. But did they really need every single teacher out here supervising this test? A familiar blonde hair caught his attention. "Hang on, why are Mount Lady and Deadshot here as well?" "For various reasons, the exam will be different from now onwards." Principal Nezu casually crawled out of Aizawa's scarf. "We want to focus on person-to-person combat and hero work and stress teaching that is closer to actual fighting. So we'll have you form teams of 2 to fight against 1 teacher." A collective gasp ran through the students. "That applies for most of you, at least." Aizawa's eyes flitted for a split second. "The pairings have already been decided at my discretion based on various factors, including fighting style, grades, and interpersonal relationships. We hope you'll learn from this experience." The teacher listed out the pairings one by one, and Izuku flinched when it came to his turn. The boy glanced at his partner, who was also glaring at their opponent. A paralyzing numbness spread through his body. There was no way anyone could even conceive of beating this guy. "So you think we need a handicap to beat you?" Bakugo growled as All Might flinched under the strain of his ultra-compressed weight. "You're underestimating us, or you're overestimating yourself, Kaken." All Might chuckled lightly, his lips curving into a slightly sinister smile. "This will be fun." And last but not least, Paganus. Aizawa kept his notes as Mount Lady and Deadshot stepped forward. "Due to your unique circumstances, you'll be battling these 2 pro heroes in order to properly test your strength." Izuku tilted his head in confusion. Apart from being a Greece exchange student, there should have been nothing else differentiating Felix from a regular student. Why the sudden special treatment? My, aren't you a handsome one?" Mount Lady smirked cheekily at the expressionless student. "I'll be sure to properly test your abilities. Please, Tenya, be professional." Deadshot shook his head slightly. "We don't want to give him the wrong impression of what it means to be a hero." Izuku swallowed hard. Felix always harbored an intense gaze before and during battle, but it seemed that the cold look in his eyes had already long transformed into something even more sinister ever. Since the Hasu City incident, the boy nodded stoically, betraying not even a hint of fear at his upcoming trial. "Hey, that's not fair," Bakugo yelled. "How come he gets to battle 2 pros by himself? This combination, could it be that the teachers are trying to see how he would fare against 2 different fighting styles at the same time?" "Yeah, Mr. Aizawa, it's not a fair fight," Ochako sounded out, and most of the class nodded in agreement. "At least let someone else pair up with him. I can assure you, this is a completely fair fight," Aizawa replied nonchalantly. "Teams, your finals will start soon. Don't take too long to strategize." Izuku pulled out his notebook and approached his friend. Felix spent most of his waiting time deep in thought. Although Izuku had been really eager to tell him about his opponent's powers, his mind was far from his practical exam. The tape recording Shigaraki gave him was concerning, to say the least. Not only had All for One managed to gain visual access to his world, the scientists had actually managed to recreate the portal that sent him here. Sure, the gate collapsed on itself almost immediately, but the purple Arcani gas flooding out of it was undeniable proof of their rapid progress, and that meant that his time in this world was almost up. "Damn it, Jin, why'd you join the League of Villains as well?" The boy clenched his fists in frustration. He always knew that this world was only a temporary lodging, but he could not deny that he had grown attached to the people here. His heart pounded impatiently. He had to go home and somehow persuade Jin to leave that dangerous organization as soon as possible. Felix Paganus prepared to enter the stage. Felix walked past his classmates, who were all cheering him on, or at least, all those who were still standing. A sizable number of students had been incapacitated after their battles, and that included Izuku and Bakugo, who had somehow pulled through despite being pounded silly by All Might. The sunlight attacked his face as he stepped into the mock-up of a residential area. "Felix Paganus, practical exam," the robotic voice announced. "Ready, go." Felix patrolled the streets casually, feeling his own training back in his homeworld kick in. If he had guessed correctly, extra points might be awarded for subduing his quarries with minimal collateral damage, and that meant the gigantifying Mount Lady was most likely going to be smashing into buildings on purpose. According to Izuku, Deadshot had the ability to fold his body into almost invisible strings of flesh, coupled with the female hero whose power was practically the polar opposite. It was obvious what kind of strategy they were going to employ against him. An ear-splitting crash caught his attention. The boy flicked his head at the gigantic lady who had somehow transformed herself, quietly enough to escape his notice. She was stomping the ground and punching buildings as though auditioning for the role of Godzilla. Pink flared in his eyes as Felix prepared to rush towards her, but his telekinetic senses screamed in. "Warning," the boy hissed, raising a clenched fist. "Pretty good distraction, hero. I might have actually been in a little trouble if I didn't already anticipate your ruse." Felix spread open his fingers slowly as a thin string of red gradually became visible. He could feel the hero struggling against his grasp, so he loosened it slightly. After all, it wouldn't be a good look if he hurt a pro hero for real. "Go." 𝗳𝗏𝗃 gurgled, his full form now completely visible and immobilized. Broken pieces of rubble flew towards him, pinning his flattened body onto the ground. "Be a good hero and stay put for me, all right." Felix released his telekinetic grip on the man. "Damn, kid. All you had to do was put the handcuffs on me." The hero cracked a pained grin at the boy. "Right, totally forgot about those." Felix hooked the school-issued handcuffs on 𝗳𝗏𝗃. "There you are, boy. Don't run." The boy turned around just in time to see a huge slab of concrete hurtling in their direction. Felix raised a finger and shredded it into dust easily. A huge shadow blocked out the sun. Mount Lady had found them. "Enjoy your gifts." Felix raised a force field as a shower of rubble rained down on him. He growled in annoyance, although the rocks were nothing but rain droplets against his shield. They were frustratingly effective at obscuring his vision. The boy threw his hand forward. "Take them back." It was Mount Lady's turn to yell as the concrete flew back at her instead, pelting her in a literal hurricane of flying debris. Felix stopped his barrage soon enough, and the woman took the chance to stomp on his force field. She hopped backwards on one foot as though she just stepped on a Lego piece, sending tremors along the ground. But she still had one more trick up her sleeve. "Canyon cannon." The giant lady leapt forward, performing a flying kick at the psychic. "Hey," she squeaked in confusion as her body froze in midair. Felix swung his hand down, setting the woman back on her feet forcefully as he burst 20 meters into the air in an instant. He took the moment to savor the genuinely fearful look in her huge eyes before pulling psychic energy in his hand. "Mind your head." Wind blasted through the buildings from the sheer air pressure of Felix's psionic punch. The hero's arms flailed limply, crashing into concrete jungle as she finally hit the ground with an earth-shattering force. Her body shrunk back to its regular size after a brief moment. So much for avoiding collateral damage. Felix landed gracefully, heading towards the exit. "I was wrong. That wasn't a fair fight at all." Aizawa kept his expression as neutral as possible while his colleagues took the time to pick up their jaws from the floor. Despite the boy's stellar performance in the sports festival, it was now clear that Felix Paganus had been massively holding back. "I can hardly believe my eyes." Class 1B's homeroom teacher, Vlad King, glanced nervously at Aizawa. "How did you get such a strong student in your class? What more can we even teach him? We teachers made sure that we left a way for the students to win so that we can properly assess their abilities." Midnight commented. "It seems 𝗳𝗏𝗃 and Mount Lady didn't receive the same instructions. And yet Paganus still crushed them like insects under his heel. Normally, I'd be delighted to receive such a talented student," 𝗬𝗏𝗃 added. "But this boy, his methods are a little too brutal. And with his power level, it seems dangerous." "It's not that he's brutal. He's just too strong for our world." Aizawa kept his head bowed. As much as he wanted to, it was still premature to tell them about Paganus' complicated origins. He trusted his colleagues, but it was still safer to let as few people as possible know about such sensitive secret. He couldn't risk drawing unnecessary attention from others seeking to exploit this knowledge. "It seems I underestimated his strength," the teacher admitted. "Not even the 2 pro heroes that I chose were a match for him." He got out of his seat, still deciding if he should allow his student to join the training camp.